or those mosquito
Or is that
bites.
mosquitoes?
Yeah.
Classic with what? Sausage, bacon, sausage or bacon?
The sausage and
If
bacon.
not,
I thought I had it all.
You're supposed to say yes, please.
I thought I had it all. I didn't read that little paragraph.
Sausage, bacon, yes.
if not, do you know what I get you? Oatmeal. Well, I didn't say it was gonna be cooked.
Seems like every time I call Ypres, they have like an hour and a half wait.
Oh my
And
goodness,
then-
wow.
And then it's like 7:30 and they're closing and they're like, hey, your food's ready. It's like,
They're slammed. They can't even pick. It's
Yeah.
bad everywhere.
they're good.
You're so front and center. Don't give me a ticket that you Bayfield Marshall, it's your trust, you're a big fan. Right?
Oh, found the batteries to the Segways. And they are charging.
Okay.
So it's all
And I made it on time.
I know. I was wondering if you were.
Yes, once the meeting starts.
I should get a tent until Brandon gets out one and realizes.
I was saying that we don't have enough people on the HOA board, so between you, Katie, and Brandon, I think I could find a, I do that for a living,
That's how I feel.
So I did get Starlink.
Oh, you got it?
Oh.
Yeah, it's fast. Yeah, it's a little weird, but yeah. I mean, it's a satellite dish that moves with the satellites, you know, with Elon Musk's satellites. So it's definitely kind of weird. It just like goes like this all the time and realigns itself, and I'm just like, yeah,
Where do you put it?
just out in like an open area, so that it can see the the sky and like follow the satellites. So you put it out like on your patio, or you could put it on your roof too if you really wanted to. But yeah, I don't know. I thought I was gonna get it in 2023, and I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a,
It's expensive though. I mean, the waiting list is really long, and the deposit was $99, and then I had to pay $530 for the equipment.
Well,
And it's like-
Alexis is
it's
running
like
late,
$100
about
a
10
month.
minutes actually.
So,
Okay, so. Oh, I just got that.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, we'll let everybody finish getting their food and getting their computers on, and we'll
Sounds good.
Kathy, I think there's plates downstairs.
get this party started.
It's on here anyway.
Printed that.
Oh. I should unbury my paperwork. Oh, nice. That's nice to have printed out. Yeah, yes. I'm like, ooh. Don't even need that.
Okay, so everybody's situated? Got some food?
Yep.
We'll go ahead and kick off this budget meeting, work session.
Here we go, fast and furious. Well, welcome to our last 2023 budget work session. As I think I've said in my email, that we were 3 days of trying to get the audit correct and some other things that we found out that we had to straighten out. So there are a lot of things we just couldn't, there may be some errors that we just need to fix, but I think we got as close as we can. So the first page, basically, it's not necessarily the agenda, but it would be this first page here. The pages are based on the August 2022 financial statements, the current year actual. And then you'll see, and when we get to the spreadsheets, you'll see the current year budget, the percent of funds spent per budget, the proposed 2023 amounts are inserted by several staff members. And then the far right column, what I really like about August is you finish 8 months, and then you calculate it, you take what we've spent current year to date times 1.5. So that makes up for the 8 months and then the 4 months that we have remaining in 2022. However, there's a couple adjustments because I wanted to make sure that the cash was correct. Like mineral and severance tax, I didn't want to calculate what that was times 1.5 because that's not necessarily what we want it to be. So there are some minor adjustments, but mostly it's the easiest way to really get a good quick look at where we are with our year-to-date budget and what it may look like at the end of the year, at the end of the 12 months. So page 4 estimates the general fund, and I'm going to keep flipping back and forth. So this first bullet, whether you star it, say we're going to go there, and they are numbered at the bottom as page 4. So if that helps, it's in red at the bottom. And in that, you'll see the budget 2023 expenditures and then the revenue. And we are $173,000 expenditures over revenues. I really think there just needs to be a couple modifications. Labor, you don't give everybody a COLA or a merit increase at the very first of the year. So that doesn't happen. We're not hiring all these people at the first of the year. There's some things that are pretty general for the full year for labor. However, there's a lot of expenses that we don't necessarily incur in January and February. So, and then there's some supplies. So I did make some minor modifications. We put uniform and clothing allowance basically into the labor costs because it's basically based on how many employees we have. But it's not necessarily, and so I tried to remove that from supplies because it shouldn't be in supplies. It now needs to be in uniform and clothing allowance. There are certain things that we're going to have to allow for, like a new bulletproof vest is not $500 per employee. So there's going to be certain things that will be a one-time cost. A bulletproof vest, I think, is 3 years. Is that about its life? 5. So, we understand that would be purchased once every 5 years. So there will be some contingencies in that. I think Public Works is asked about boots. And, in my experience, I know boots are over $100 to replace every year. Maybe that's another thing that we consider in Public Works because they do have to have boots to work really in the conditions that they're working in. So that may be something to increase. And in this includes most of the FTE cost we're going to switch back and forth here a lot. If you go to page 26, which is at the bottom of those documents, the first 4, the facilities and grounds maintenance, code enforcement, receptionist, park seasonal is all in the general fund. The sewer distribution and collection is the only one in a different fund. So those will be 4 new, not pure FTEs. We have one full-time, 2 part-time, and a temporary. So that adds cost to that. And as you may remember, we considered adding health insurance for the employee only for part-time employees, not for temporary, but for part-time employees. So that's in there. And we have 2 patrol vehicles, so it's likely that we could sell a patrol vehicle that is not operational. We recently just sold a truck for $4,000. You have to strip them down, you have to remove all of the law enforcement equipment off of them. Sometimes, that lowers the auction price. But what I've found in my experience is people from Missouri and Wisconsin and places where they have a lot of rust, the Rust Belt, they'll pay a lot more for a Colorado vehicle because they know that it doesn't have the undercarriage rusted out. So those are things to do. So I'm pretty sure with a little bit of discussion with department directors, we can get this below to break even. However, you still have some reserves, basically, if you decided, if I couldn't quite get it down to the full, 0, so that we're expenditures and revenues match. So now it's your chance, basically. I'd like to kind of get your impression, your discussion on the general fund. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about facilities and grounds and maintenance. I'll tag maybe Jeremy and Ryan for facilities and grounds and why that's necessary, Nicole for code enforcement, maybe Kathy or Rachel for receptionist, and then back to Ryan for the park seasonal. So we'll talk a little bit about facilities and grounds maintenance and why we need it.
Is that you or is that me? I'm asking for a sewer operator. Anyway, so we've noticed that in the last couple of years, and I think kind of COVID helped us as well too, that a lot of the buildings in town, senior center, town hall, there's a lot of deferred maintenance. So typically it's kind of the same conversation we've been having. If we want someone in public works, which we've been doing a lot of the facilities maintenance and deferred maintenance, we have to pull somebody away from water, sewer, and street operations to have them come facilitate some of the maintenance activity, filter changes, dilapidated AC systems, roofing. We had a lot of roof leaks. We've had quite a bit of water this year. And then, you'll see in the regular packet, Ryan's got some quotes for some deck maintenance and things like that. So that's really what we're talking about when we're saying facility maintenance, is somebody that can take over some of that full-time building and facility scheduling work to be able to make sure that our buildings are kept in optimum manner and operating appropriately, as well as safety. I mean, the railing and stuff that is coming apart at the senior center, that's a safety concern, especially for some, our aging community that's there. That's basically what we're asking for, is an additional staff member that can probably split some of those duties, some of that facility maintenance and the grounds. And we're still, I I think Parks Ryan's gonna manage that guy. They would fall into the general fund, as I stated on sheet number 26.
Is that a full-time position?
Currently, it is
Yeah, we have to list it.
scheduled for a full-time position, yes.
So is that the salary that's 55 grand or?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe that the 55 grand total, does that include health, medical insurance, and
No.
is that total labor cost, or is that just salary?
No, if you go to page 26, it includes, that's just the
Extra.
salary.
So, yeah, the
So
total.
you have 83,000, that would include health insurance, and some of the other benefits.
So on this page 26, that we have all the salaries, and it's about just a little bit under $500,000 difference. So we're saying that there's how many new employees in that new budget?
In the new budget, there's one full-time, two part-time, excuse me, in the general fund, there's one full-time, two part-time, and one temporary.
Okay. That makes sense. And then, of course, increases in
And then the sewer fund would be a full-time.
salaries and stuff like that. So I noticed like when they talk about like the vision, and you have it budgeted for 56,000 proposed for 2023, but we only made it to not quite 38,000. I'm assuming that those new positions, that's part of it, plus the increase in
That's
what their
correct.
costs are. Okay.
So I usually went to CML's job board to see if some of these jobs were listed, to kind of get an idea. Like parks, we're just taking what we typically spend for a seasonal person. A receptionist, just kind of looking at what we would pay for part-time. And then code enforcement, I did find one job position, but it was in a municipality that's not our size, so it's hard to make that comparison.
Well, yeah, I think all these positions are valid and actually needed. I think more importantly, though, the health insurance for the current staff should be, that's like my biggest concern, is that all the current staff is happy. And any way we can do that to make them happy and retain them, that's my biggest thing, is I want to retain the current staff before we add new staff and have them be happy. I know that's kind of like maybe not necessarily a concern I should be worried about, but I know that the health insurance options that you lined out last time, I mean, just looking over it, as far as costs are concerned, I mean, option number one seems to be the most financially feasible for the current staff. But I don't think there are any other options, are there? I mean, these are the best rates around, and yeah, so that's my number one concern. But these other positions that we need to add for 2023, every one of them seems like we need them. So,
So let me give you an update on health insurance, because I think that's an important piece. I was hoping that we would have something for you to consider tonight. We had another meeting with the employees. The employees at the meeting thought maybe it was worth it to go out to do the survey. I think we had nine total out of 22 that are in the system that filled it out. Both vendors were kind of like, well, is that all you're going to get? And I said, not everybody feels comfortable filling out the survey when it's really, it's an application. So, I don't know what the reasons are, but I did hear from some, like, I'm not going to do it. I don't have a computer. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. So, so they're gonna do with the 9 people that they got, but that may not help us understand what the rest of the employees will do.
One of my questions, too, is that, I want to make sure that we are able to offer a competitive wage for whoever's going to be in charge of our police department, the marshal's office. And whether or not we have budgeted accordingly for that potential. I mean, I think like if we have to go higher and to be competitive, we could always take from the code enforcement piece of it. But I do worry about that. We need a quality leader.
So I sent to KRW the, based on our wage scale, with a little bit of adjustment, assuming we're going to 2023. I'm sorry, I'll have to just pull that up, because I.
And there's not a world where that facilities and maintenance and grounds, or grounds maintenance and park seasonal can be one person?
Well, that's more a Ryan comment, but I think for the grounds maintenance and the park seasonal, just by definition, you're looking at somebody that's maybe in the parks for 3 to 4 months, and then I'm not sure if during the winter and the colder weather, if they move into facility maintenance, I'm not sure how Ryan plans on managing that time.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, like,
Well-
in the busy times, if you could allocate most of like the field maintenance and mowing and, you know,
Right.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to,
Well, if you combine one person into a full-time employment, you're then now paying for all the benefits too, so if we keep them part-time, we
Yeah,
don't
but
pay out
one
the
is full-time.
benefits.
One already is full-time,
One
yeah.
is full-time?
Yeah.
You mean like
like, that's what I'm wondering, if there's any,
add more of
any world,
those
and-
other
yeah.
duties to that person? Is that what you're
Yeah, I
saying?
don't know, cost-wise, what, you know,
Gosh, I don't.
maybe the, you know, biggest bang for our buck is, but I feel like the full-time, facility and grounds person, you know, especially if they can, you know, if they're in my department and they're gonna be able to work in the parks in the summer, I feel like, you know, that's probably a more, you know, comprehensive position where we're gonna get more out of that position than just a part-time seasonal. Part-time seasonals are really hard to hire. You know, it's usually at a low wage, seasonal, so a lot of times, you know, those positions are looking, you know, for something full-time, and, you know, there's a lot of times they don't stick around as long, where if you had a full-time position that, you know, you offered benefits to and a, you know, livable wage, I feel like, you know, they could help in the parks and also, you know, relieve some of the stress that we're dealing with now with, like Jeremy said, the deferred maintenance, like rather than being reactionary all the time, you know, we're actually on a schedule, things are being maintained between the senior center, town hall. So, I mean, if I had to pick one, I would pick the full-time position.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little more attractive of a job, but like I said, I know there's a lot of deferred maintenance that needs to happen and it's gonna keep somebody super busy, but, you know, just there are days where I'm just wondering if you say, okay, you're Monday, Tuesday, you're out here, you're over here helping with parks. I just don't know. I'm just trying to, you know, try to make that a more attractive position that somebody'd wanna stick around for.
Right.
I mean, I think you find a guy like Travis, can't Travis kind of do a lot of stuff? He's like a jack of all trades guy. I mean,
Yeah, he has a lot of building maintenance experience.
that would be like ideal if you could find it, you know, another.
So the marshal's salary, what I sent to KRW is a salary between 85,000 to 103.5, $103,000. It's not gonna compete with La Plata County, it's not gonna compete with Durango, but I did contact Pagosa Springs, and they were like, ooh, ouch. Well, you're gonna get our, people apply for it, so.
And the budget reflects probably the high end of that number, I'm assuming?
And I do know that a year ago, or probably 18 months ago, we were higher than Pagosa Springs in our law enforcement to begin with. So Andrea used our numbers to at least bring her staff up. But, you know, it's still one of those things where you will negotiate if that's what you choose to do.
So my biggest concern is that when we talked about this the last time, especially with staff pay, is that it's not sustainable. So I kind of like the idea of a part-time person, even though you may not get as qualified person or anything like that, because a part-time person doesn't typically stay very long. And they're easier to remove those positions in the future if you have to. They're not like a full-time person where you have to remove a position because your budget doesn't afford it the following year.
I'm gonna disagree, only because there is so much deferred maintenance in these two buildings, that the last thing I want is somebody that comes and goes and comes and goes. And we're always trying to figure out a new maintenance schedule with somebody new.
And if I may, when I first started here, I spent the majority of my time going around fixing things at buildings versus doing my actual job.
I think we could hire someone who's facilities and grounds and let them know that in the summer there might be some additional outdoor parks and rec work that they need to do, and then assess then, because it might be that they knock out all of the, like, a lot of the deferred maintenance, and then they have the time, and then we made the smart decision of hiring one, or we determine, oh my God, this person is so busy, we do need to hire someone else, and then, I mean, we make that decision at that point. Because
So,
we're talking.
Like leave it in the budget kind of a thing?
Well, I
Just in
think,
case, but hire the one?
well, I think we hire the one, letting them know that they're gonna be doing both. And then assess when we get to that summer part, how much were they able to achieve before the summer? So that we see what Brian's needs are, because if this person's not able to meet them, we're gonna have to consider what would we do then. But I agree that hiring someone wants a full-time job with full-time benefits. I don't think that we want someone who's gonna know these buildings and be committed to wanting to be in Bayfield. But I feel as if we can always add that work on and then assess when it happens.
And that is correct, because you won't hire seasonal until April.
Yeah.
And they, you know, if we can get somebody that early.
But leave it in the budget, kind of, so that it's there, that way we don't have to come back and do a
Right.
revision, right?
So I'm gonna let Nicole talk a little bit about code enforcement, just in her operations in community development.
Yeah, so code enforcement, I mean, I think there is a way to work closely with the marshal's office to possibly do code enforcement. The thing that we're doing right now is we're reactive. So, and we're not being proactive out there, and especially when we're having these stormwater issues, it'd be nice to have somebody a little more proactive if stormwater is gonna be a big, thing for us next year. And then a lot of the developments and stuff, you know, we're having people that are doing work without building permits, and so I'm writing letters and, working with them, and, having a code enforcement officer to help with that piece as well, and just kind of being that secondary for Dan when we have to red tag somebody. So there's a lot of things, if we're gonna bring in noxious weeds, that's a whole other program that we're gonna be looking at, and again, stormwater, what's that gonna look like next year? So there are some big things that a code enforcement officer would be good at. You know, a little concerned with part-time, I don't know if we find somebody who wants to do that part-time, we might. So we'll see how it plays out.
And then we've talked about the seasonal parks and talk a little bit about the part-time receptionist. Maybe Rachel or Kathy.
Well, I think for the receptionist, when I started 13 years ago, so in 2009, admin was a staff of 4. There was 2 people at the front desk, a finance director and a clerk. Well, the clerk and finance was one person, and then a deputy clerk. Over the years, we got down to 2 of us, we're back up to 3 of us. And Jill is doing a wonderful job at the front desk, but she's also doing all the utility billing and trying to help with the document management, trying to get that up and running and organize that. And when she's doing the cash receipting first thing in the morning and trying to do it all day and wait on customers and talk on the phone and do the billing, it's time consuming, and that's where our mistakes happen. She needs some relief. She needs some time to dedicate to the duties she's supposed to do and let someone else answer the phone, talk to the customers, you know, for 3 or 4 hours every morning.
Okay, I'm gonna go on. What I'm hearing is keep those in the budget for right now. We can certainly make some of those contingent on coming back to the board. I'm thinking park seasonal
Yeah.
would be one of those. I think probably what we would also do is bring a job description for the facilities and grounds person as well. We'll probably add some seasonal parks. Keep in mind, they're changing oil and also doing some, you know, minor car maintenance as well. So we'll do that, but I think those two positions will come back to the board, you know, contingent on, you know, your approval at some point in 2023.
Okay.
So the next one is the Colorado Trust Fund, which is at the bottom of, it's on page 5. It's a really short page. These are called Colorado, CTF is what I've always labeled it, Colorado Trust Fund. It's lottery money that comes to the town of Bayfield based on our population. And the only thing I really need to see there is there's no expenditures, but we probably need to put this in a Colorado Trust account separate from basically just in the checking account, because there is no interest. And typically, what I'm surprised at is typically during an audit, they want to know what your interest is from your Colorado Trust receipts. So we just need to make sure that we move that over and make some adjustments based on interest that probably was paid to the general fund. So there's really not a whole lot to discuss on that one. Page 6 at the bottom of the sewer fund. We do have a loss of $806,000, but we also our assumption is spending almost $700,000 of the ARPA funds. Our goal, we have to spend those before 2024. Replace the diffusers and nitrogen removal. And so we have had our engineer working on that. At this point, it's a little bit of a target we're trying to hit without CDPHE updating our permit. But I think that we need to, at least the diffusers we know that need to be replaced.
That's correct.
Nitrogen removal may be something that we make sure that we get done, if nothing else, before June of 2024.
Remind me, that has to be spent, not just earmarked. It has
It
to
has to be
be.
spent. It's
Okay.
already earmarked.
Okay, so, all right, that's gonna.
Yeah, so the upgrades to the sewer treatment facility, we're hoping to schedule for construction next year.
Okay.
We did, just as an update, get some pricing back from Sanitaire for the nutrient removal and some of those additional control packages. It's about $334,000 for the probes, equipment, mixers, control package. So we're working with SGM right now to see if we can't whittle that down and make sure we're keeping it within budget.
And the other one is the I&I. We have a 5-year program now. We're actually 2 years into that program, collecting I&I funds. And our goal is to spend those basically to remove the I&I on private systems. So that's a lot of, we have the camera data, and we'll start to analyze that and determine where we need to remove that I&I, probably private lines or private connections in our system. And keep in mind that reduces your hydraulic capacity in your sewer plant, giving you more capacity for more homes that may be coming on. But a lot of that's just irrigation water that we're fairly certain is just running basically into our system through some of the older portion of town. And so those two items are almost, $800,000 themselves, which we know that we have to spend in capital, which will reduce the reserves in the sewer fund. And I don't see any issue. There is a additional employee in this fund, sewer distribution and collection in that fund. And we do need that person, and I'll let Jeremy talk about that additional.
So what we're seeing, well, actually with all the stormwater stuff, I know that's kind of a buzzword, not to put on that, but that's been a majority of Public Works time, is stormwater and a lot of land use issues. So that's why we've opted to put the new proposed employee in the sewer fund. We're hoping that we can either do some restructuring within the department or, hire potentially someone qualified. This position also adds some succession planning. We do have some plant operator, or a plant operator that's getting towards retirement. We'd like to start working somebody else into the treatment operations throughout the plants, and we're a little bit lopsided right now. We have 4 people alternating on the on-call for after hours for the town, and we have 3 in plants. So this would allow us that option to get a little bit more balanced approach moving forward. And then I think it does give us a really good opportunity in the next couple years to get some other people trained up and hopefully have a seamless transition when we do get some of those older employees closer to retirement.
Is there a current benefit for someone to start like brand new as an operator and get their certifications, and then they get maybe a raise, compensation for doing that? Because I found working at the wastewater plant Durango that the incentive for new operators is if you get your D certificate and then you get your C and then B and A, you get a raise, and for each one except for the D. But if there's some kind of benefit there for someone that's looking at a long-term stay, I think that would be beneficial. That's not necessarily for the 2023 budget, but it would be for, let's get an operator in, give them 6 months to figure it out, and if they end up being a really good operator and get their certificates, then they get compensated somehow. That should be maybe a long-term plan, but I found that that's a good way to retain operators.
We currently already are operating a certification incentive program that we run through the department, and that falls underneath the merit-based increases that you're looking at. When Katie had that on the front page, we've been doing it for almost 2 years now, I think 18 months. And so what we're doing with our entry-level employees is we're wanting to get their 1s and their Ds. We're offering a 1% increase for that, and then it goes up from there to your A's. We do have one treatment operator that has been motivated, and he's been able to work his way up to an A water treatment and a B wastewater treatment operator's license within a few years. And so there is a lot of room within the department to advance. Just depends on how motivated that employee is and how they're able to move through there. And we do reward that. We're really looking to keep qualified operators employed for the town of Bayfield.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good. It offers incentive for other employees too. Like, I'm an engineer by education and profession, but I ended up getting my A certificate within a year at the wastewater plant, and that kind of got the other guys, hey, we need to get our certificates too. So they started taking the tests, and it inspires morale between the operators. And hey, I want to get my certificate too, and I want to raise, I want to do a good job. And so yeah. It's.
And we've seen it also promote some healthy competition too within the ranks, so, but that's a good point.
So in the capital, and thanks for bringing that up, Eli, because that was not necessarily what when I came here. I was kind of surprised, the system. So we want to make sure we retain them.
Yeah,
here.
any operator can start brand new and be fresh, and you never know what type of operator they're going to be, if they're going to be successful, if they're going to be the guy that goes and shovels rocks off of a roof. I mean, they're all needed, but if someone wants to advance professionally and financially, like, the incentives are there, which is good, and that goes in line with retaining employees too. Because I know, a lot of operators, they come in, they leave, it's just the way it is, So retaining employees is more of a long-term goal, but I think that that's important, so.
So next is a capital improvement plan. It's on page 7, the red numbers at the bottom. This is a city sales tax fund, and this is what we're estimating 2023 to be in sales tax. And even though we had almost $200,000 of mineral and severance tax, we knocked it back down to $15,000 just to be very conservative. As fuel prices start to go back up, we may see another jump in that. But I've always, in my experience, have been very conservative with mineral and severance. You never know what it's going to be from year to year. So we do get interest in this. The Parks and Lieu fee goes here as well. That is restricted for parks. The park facility impact fees, that's also something that we collect with, it's an ordinance that you collect with each new lot that's sold. And then broadband was in the capital improvement fund in the last 2 years, and that's where I left it. Everything else, you'll see the transfer of $450,000 is in the general fund. So if you go to the capital improvement fund, with those capital improvements on page 16, you'll see those itemized there for the general fund. So there's admin, the marshal's office, and parks. And those are the items that, there's almost $500,000. $50,000 from our understanding is coming from the post grant that Marshall McIntyre had applied for. And then the other $450,000 would come from capital. And these all are eligible to be paid out of that capital improvement fund. So if you believe that there's something we remove off of there out of the $498,000, please take a good quick look at that list and see if there's something that you have questions about. So you will see in the cash reserves, there's almost $1.5 million in that fund. The goal is always to keep funds in there for major capital improvements. And the negative $25,000, I don't believe, is an issue. It is a balanced budget using that portion of those reserves. There's some of these things that we may not do, like the 3-inch water tap, which is $60,000 we may not do. We're looking at some flower beds out front here, which is only $1,500. We would like to see what we can do with building something up to put a flower bed in, but that's a long ways off to kind of figure out what that's going to look like. We have a lot of dead trees around Town Hall that, if nothing else, we'd like replaced. 2 years ago, we had all the dead bushes removed out front. And Beth found us free mulch. So, the most expensive part of that was removing all those big rocks. That's what cost us probably more than anything.
Katie, what's the senior center remodel? Is that the decking, or is that the door, or is
No,
that the kitchen?
that's basically to move some entrances around.
Oh, that's, okay, thank you.
So for better rental use.
Okay.
And it's just a real close guess.
Mm-hmm. Did we add in here paying for the deck and the door?
So the
anywhere?
deck and the door, there is capital improvements that you budgeted for 2022.
Okay. So we can still do that this year?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, I
thank
mean,
you.
that's on
The
your
plan?
agenda coming
Okay.
up.
I have a question about the Little Pine restroom. Since we've been going with CDOT on this tree, What kind of issues are we gonna run into with this bathroom?
Well, I don't think there's any issues with the bathroom.
The-
The tree,
Yeah.
the tree is in CDOT right away. So we're trying to get with CDOT and hopefully they'll absorb some of that cost. We had an arborist that had reported the tree needed to be removed. CDOT's arborist saying that it can be trimmed, which if it's their tree, I'm more than happy to let them trim it or remove it or whatever they want.
Looks
The
dead.
restroom, there was a previous restroom installed at the roadside park prior, and what the hope is behind that is that we can use that same old infrastructure. Now we'll have to open it up, and there'll be some excavation, we'll need to pressure test a water line, check sewer lines and things like that. Or if we go with what Katie suggested, maybe a pit toilet, I'm not sure. But that will all be under town's control and in town proper, so that would all be run through you guys.
Just making sure we're not gonna run into problems there.
On grant money.
All right, I'm gonna move past capital improvements and go to the water fund. And this is where I kind of have some concerns about the loss in here. And the only reason is you go back to page 16 and look at some of the capital improvements in here. So in water, we have, trees and landscaping, security system, which obviously is probably one time. But a lot of these are some things that you would assume would be covered under your, the fees that you collect. So like the smart hydrants, the meter replacement, the meter relocation is new, and we're gonna keep replacing meters. Distribution communication, I don't know if that's new or if that's something that's ongoing.
No, that's new. What we're proposing to do this year is actually add all the PRVs to SCADA. We've had a few high-pressure complaints over the past 3 months, and then off and on since we installed the new PRV at the Speedway. So what we're hoping to do is get real-time communication added to those PRVs. We can monitor those pressure and hopefully make those adjustments before we're getting complaints from our customers, is what that's intended for.
And then the water leak detection, is that just a piece of equipment or a sensor that's a one-time purchase?
It's a one-time purchase piece of equipment to help us detect water leaks.
And the old plant generator backup, that's just a one-time purchase or a replacement?
One-time purchase.
Then the SCADA equipment, is that a one-time purchase?
Yes and no.
Okay.
That's gonna be ongoing. Will that dollar amount increase? Probably not. Will it decrease? It could. But we're always constantly trying to stay with the modern technology in our plants for the operations for our treatment.
Yeah, I mean, Durango, we're still making improvements to SCADA, for wastewater plants, so it's like, it's an ongoing thing. It'll go for the next 5-10 years, and then we'll have a completely new technology, so.
Or you get an update and your equipment doesn't function with the update.
Right, yeah.
So there are probably a lot more that they just explained to you that maybe I'm not necessarily understand, but I still think there's basically some loss in your water fund as far as fee collections. As we, like I said before, I like to put these fees 2 years in place, and then 2024 have another rate study to kind of see where we're at with our water, because I think that it'll give us a better idea in a couple of years, so. So these are most of the losses in capital improvements. It doesn't necessarily mean you bankrupt your water fund.
Katie, do these losses include the increases we had talked about?
Yes.
Okay.
For personnel?
No, for increase in
Yes.
people paying for water. Didn't-
Yes.
Okay.
So if you look at the 12 months calculated for this year, $747,000 are really past the wet, and if it keeps raining, that's going to go down So we proposed $860,000. So we're looking at a possible increase, but this is probably something you're gonna need to pay attention to. And the one thing that just kind of was curious to me when I first got here is that your water was really low, and you didn't really charge your water fund for anything like for the town manager position, and there was a lot of positions that got charged the sewer fund, but not the water fund. So I don't know if they were just artificially kept low for some reason. I understand that what gets your population upset because the rates are going up. However, you do have to keep up with what it costs.
Is that just because water treatment is less complicated than wastewater treatment? I mean, I know that the funds for the sewer plant in Durango are probably way higher than the water treatment facility. That's just working there for a year, but it seems like the water treatment plant, they have upgrades and stuff every year, but it seems like the majority of the upgrades went to the wastewater plant, at least the funds.
No, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily an offset as far as operational costs. You're using a little bit more water and some of those other resources at the wastewater facility, and potentially some less electricity, more electricity at the water treatment plant. So it just depends on, the pumps are a lot larger, the drives are a lot larger, a lot of the SCADA equipment and sensors are, you have quite a bit more process controls that we have to answer for the state for turbidity, chlorine, residual, contact time, all those things. And then, you have your storage equipment. So I don't know if it's the operational cost is lower. I just think that the rates didn't necessarily keep pace with the cost of production. So say for, our one-time order for coagulant, we've seen a 25% increase in EC 309. We're buying it bulk to save money over time, but we've seen it go from 15,000 to 22, and probably this year it might go up as high as 28,000 for that same $2,500 of chemical. So we're seeing our chloride go up. You're seeing our chlorine go up. Those delivery costs, we're getting surcharges from DPD. So that's where those costs are coming in, and they're kind of starting to catch up with us because people are having to charge us pass through to get those chemicals to the plant, and we haven't necessarily passed that cost on to our consumer.
So yeah, I guess we're a little behind as a town, like for water rates, right? Or
I would say your water rates are far behind your sewer rates.
okay.
And I don't know if it was purposely or what, but, so I'm not seeing a whole lot of outcry about the difference in expenditures over revenues. I don't see anything on this list that should be removed for capital. Then the garbage fund, which is on page 10, we have been using this for a utility relief, and I think we're up to about $2,200 right now for utility relief. We still want to get people that need it to get on LEAP. They do get a discount if they're on LEAP for their heat, and then of course we give them another discount if they're eligible, and they just provide us a simple documentation they're eligible for this next year. So, and LEAP applications open up November 1st for this year. There's not necessarily a reason to hold a lot of reserves in your garbage fund. That they should equal out revenues and expenditures over time. But I think this will be probably a closer look next year. We'll kind of see if GFL sends us new rates this year or what. But anyway.
Yeah, who knows with GFL?
Who knows?
The service gets
Who knows if they're
more
gonna pick it
poor
up.
and they charge more, so.
And then my number one concern is the street fund. So if you skip the next page, page 11, there'll be a loss of $2 million. And so in the capital improvements, on page 16, you'll see that we have a loss of almost $800,000 in stormwater management. And that only addresses what capital improvements we believe we need to do in next year. That does not take into consideration the 2014 stormwater feasibility study that had certain things that we needed to do and the costs associated with those. So this is only a portion of stormwater management, and I realize that that's your number one goal, but now how do we figure out how to pay for it? You can wipe out the street fund and stormwater in a couple of years.
Well, is this where we talked about a ballot measure or a tax or something to manage this?
And we will be meeting on October 17th, it's a Monday, to basically talk about, with the public, about the challenges with stormwater. And we did talk to our attorney today as well. Everybody comes to the town because, my crawl space or my house is flooded. And he's basically telling us it's really a civil issue between homeowners. But, we either decide to manage it, the minute we do Dove Ranch, and I'm sorry, we have some members of Dove Ranch here, and then we do Dove Ranch, we don't do the rest of the community. You may get some outcry, well, why are you taking care of, because you're the elected body, are you taking care of, and I'm not pointing at anybody, but I just want to make sure that the public may wonder why the town's paying for one subdivision and not other subdivisions. And we have a lot more information on Dove Ranch that Nicole has found, that most of all these easements for stormwater all belong to an HOA that doesn't even exist.
And we'll just wait till the 17th for all that information, or?
We're probably gonna mention the options with the public in terms of what do we cut? Or how do we pay for this? And then probably have some sort of voting exercise so that if we at least get
A feel.
information from that, the public that attended, on what their thoughts are, and of course, it's going to be a bigger discussion.
So in a lot of ways, even though this is your number one, I may have this a contingency, we come back to the board when we decide to spend these dollars. We could go get a DOLA grant for Dove Ranch, however, it's still, it's still an expense that the town would have to absorb on, in some fund, somewhere.
Is any part of this, I guess you can tell me if we need to wait till the 17th, but a partnership with the homeowners in that area that decided to disband the HOA, and if they had an HOA, I'm sure that would be part of what they would be working on. It would be stormwater management. I know if we had overflowing ponds in our neighborhood, we would probably be working on that as an HOA. So I'm just kind of curious, is there a discussion of those who live in that neighborhood taking on some of that cost?
It's actually, each homeowner is responsible.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if we're saying the town's going to take over all that responsibility, and since this is your number one concern with the street fund, I'm just wondering if there's an option that the homeowners would be also involved in some of this discussion.
You can do an assessment district. I mean, there's things you can do that are only tied to those homeowners and not the rest of the community, but
I'm just curious.
we need to talk about.
Okay.
It's not an easy problem to bring before you. It's not an easy problem to solve because it's very expensive. And it affects everybody's private, their home. But I think eventually we've got to figure out how we're going to manage it, or we don't manage it at all. So, other than taking $800,000 out for stormwater, making it contingent to come back to the board, it would probably be in there. It still balances the budget, but just any other concerns about anything in here?
Yeah, I'm concerned
Yeah,
that
stormwater's a
$3.6 million, that
Yeah.
doesn't work. That takes us from almost 11 million in reserves to 7.3 million in reserves. I mean, it makes me sick. I don't want to approve it.
So housing development, we still have a lot I know that there was an interview regarding the grant that, or the letter of interest. Nicole, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, for Cinnamon Heights, we're asking for 2.8 million infrastructure and TIPs, tap fees. And there is we applied for, we did the initial letter of interest, and they said in November they're going to be calling for interviews, and then see if we can go on to the next one.
So the equipment replacement fund, I think we had over $1 million when we got here, and I asked the staff that was here, well, what are you supposed to do with it? And there was no plan. Basically, over the years, you've taken a little bit out of water, a little bit out of sewer, a little bit out of the here and there, and it just kept growing in that fund. And in my honest opinion, I don't think you need an equipment replacement fund. I think eventually you take that $200,000, you could probably even transfer it to the street fund, that's a eligible fund, or transfer it to the capital improvement fund. At some point, I'm not gonna say this year, but probably next year, and basically eliminate that fund. It takes a couple, 3 years before you don't see it anymore, but there's really no, I'm not really too sure why it's there. And there wasn't a plan to use the money other than squeaking out little pieces of dollars every year from other funds.
Oh, you're right. So there wasn't a vehicle depreciation schedule or anything like that, or a replacement associated with that fund. So the only thing that I've heard was it was to, in case of a catastrophic failure, replace a large piece of equipment. But it wasn't earmarked for which large piece of equipment, or for what fund it would be replacing that equipment
So you
from.
guys ended up fighting over it if something.
And I'm not very good at arm wrestling.
Page 14 obviously combines all of these in one location, and when Brenna says, it's $3.6 million, part of this is the money that we had collected in previous years that we intended to spend. Some of this is, the water fund, that's going to be $275,000 of extra expenditures over revenues, which you're going to have to look at your water rates. Probably a little more next year. We're looking at 15% increase for 2023, but I think we need to spend a little more time on those rates other than some of the other funds. Most of it's in the street fund, $2 million regarding storm, and a lot of it's stormwater. And I have a feeling if you ask the citizens, do you want to do streets or stormwater, the people that are getting their house flooded want you to do something with stormwater, and most of your public are going to say, please take care of your streets.
We're looking for grants on some of that stuff. Is that what I understand? But it's already considered in there?
It's already considered in there, yep. So stormwater is a top priority. It's one of those things that I think we're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do. Either do something, do partly something, or do nothing. Then we have the state energy regarding the energy performance contract for the town hall and senior center. We're probably just going to do some investigation. So what that process is they'll give you a grant basically to have a consultant to determine your energy use. And we have solar panels on the senior center that nobody knows whether they operate or not. So typically you're going to find a consultant that can give you some contractors that could analyze that and determine if they are useful. We have some issues here with HVAC here at Town Hall. I don't know if you remember, we had buckets upstairs and tubs in a swimming pool collecting water because we had a leak upstairs. And And then we have a contract with KRW regarding filling the town marshal and filling the town marshal vacancy. So the capital expenditures on page 16, we've all taken a look at that. I'm not hearing that anything actually comes off of there. Staff will go through this one more time to make sure there's nothing left that they think that they have to have. So we'll do that one more time. Nicole, I just put that document in there. Nicole's worked really hard to kind of analyzing those grants and what grants are out there for what projects we have, especially stormwater, the intersections, the pedestrian walkway across 160, the housing. So she's done a lot of that work. I think that was probably an older document, but if you'd like her to update that, we'll make sure that we get that to you as well. On pages 18 and 19 are from August 16th. The payroll numbers basically are modified. As you may remember, I didn't have any overtime amounts before. So now I have overtime and I have on-call. And so I modified the labor just a tad, or, well, a lot for some funds, especially the water fund, regarding overtime and on-call. And then the marshal's office will start having on-call too, so we may get a better idea in the next payroll period, kind of where we're at with that as well. And then admin fees, the auditor, and we're gonna work with the auditor really close through this budget season, is administration reimbursement. So I have $200,000 from the sewer fund, $200,000 from the water fund, $25,000 from the garbage fund, and believe it, we spend a lot more time on that garbage fund here at Town Hall than sometime, well, not on the water or sewer fund, but some of the other funds, street fund and the other government funds. So when you take a look at all the expenses, the town board expense, the administrative, administration labor, and actually what it takes to operate Town Hall, it's $1.1 million. And then you want to make sure that these funds are paying their appropriate share. So that's why I put the 18%, 2%, 9%, and 53%. The general fund should always pay more, but just a slight bit more than 50%. So it's just kind of give you an idea where those administration reimbursement fees come from. We also talked about the investigator, Sergeant Cashwell, has applied and was offered the position of the investigator. And we're still working with Lieutenant Tischer to make sure that we have full coverage here in the town. So there's been a lot of things that we'll have to be aware of and what's going on. And then update on page number 8, on page 8, there was a update regarding yes, I know, you know what, remember what that was?
Page 8, it's more like, I think, I'm not sure.
Oh, I know what it is.
Page 8?
Sorry, I'll find it. We're having a. So on page 19, number 11, it talks about the general fund increase alone is $273,000. And all of that's changed since we did that August 16th, just so you're aware of that. Sorry, it was kind of I had to remember what it was about. The increase to the street fund, the labor increased $5,838. It was only $2,000 before. But of course, most of the concern is about stormwater cost in the street fund. And then the partnerships are listed on page 27, just so you have that. That shows you what those partnerships are. So the $74,000 is the total amount for your partnerships and community grant issues. And of course, Lisa's here from Homes Fund. We do have an agreement, $9,040 we've been paying a year for income analysis of Fox Farm. So, you know, it'd probably be a discussion with her to determine if we renew that or not. And then the RHA, I just wanted to make sure that you saw the agreement that you may see that includes these amounts from the RHA for housing across La Plata County, so.
Is there any update on our RHA discussions?
We haven't had another meeting since.
It'll be on the 10th.
Okay.
Yeah. While you're thinking about it, we may just move the food in the other room and give Lisa a place to give her presentation. How's that?
Everybody need a stretch break? I'm hungry. I keep smelling it, but I'm like, I'm gonna wait till the end to eat. Before the meeting.
Katie, are you done with this Zoom?
I know. but
Katie, are we done with this Zoom then?
I'm gonna bring
No,
it- bring it
Lisa's on this.
up
Lisa's still in the work session.
To every. People live in different, you know what I mean? It's everywhere.
No, it's everywhere. I mean, it's not just us. We're gonna have to, and the reason we have to branch was because
Yeah,
it
sounds
was
good.
going to-
EPOS is pretty good.
Yeah.
And so this town wants to ditch it. So my concern is the town. I mean, I get, I live there. To not have to worry about it because I live there.
Yeah.
The reality of it is that if the town is going to get in trouble for it, we need to pay. If
So,
the town is responsible in any way.
Yeah, and it's not just happening here. Like this rain is causing,
that's all you miss.
because there's crushed culverts and there's all this, you know.
Before this,
Right.
so there was issues with it before the rain.
No, I'm gonna leave it here and we're gonna
And
do it
that's,
later.
Okay, let me wipe this off.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Thanks. Thanks, Dad.
you sit there and you
Yep.
Well, it's funny because I read the email and that's where I saw
put their house on top of it. The ones they just built. Then that's an easement that is owned by the HOA. Is the town responsible for that?
I don't know.
Or is that civil?
That's the
Just
whole
tell me
question.
which way you want it.
Just 1 minute, ma'am.
How often do they send these out? Like once a week?
Can I start you with something?
Are there 3 of me somewhere? Because I'm like,
It's a lot. It's a lot.
I've thrown away like 11 of those.
That,
Or more than that, actually, probably, but
I feel that way about myself.
I still,
Yeah, it's like their
I
newsletter.
still have never had EPOS breakfast. This is pretty good.
I don't think I've had a burrito, but I've had sandwiches.
And I don't
Yeah,
want
I
to
guess
hear
I kept forgetting that they have breakfast.
Oh,
'cause,
right. Don't be here. I mean, it's.
yeah, I just
I
kept
don't
forgetting.
think about pizza.
I don't,
Place for
yeah, I don't
breakfast.
think about breakfast on Saturday morning at EPOS, but maybe I should. I'm not gonna be able to
So we
make that
have
meeting
you,
though.
6:45 to 7:15, but about 20 minutes and leaving about 10 minutes to ask questions. Because then we gotta move everything for a regular meeting. Okay, yeah, I will. I will.
Okay, excellent. I trust you.
We'll give everybody a minute, I guess,
Yep.
to.
Everyone to resettle.
This is confusing, go back and forth.
I know.
Page numbers were really confusing.
think there's anything that we can, I mean, there's nothing we can do this year, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
We've
just pull
gotta-
it off and push it off to the next week. I mean, that's really where we're at on it.
but have a plan, not just like,
No,
you
I-
know,
yeah.
like in the past,
I
go,
agree.
we'll deal with it.
I
That's
agree. It needs to be in the future, and we plan it and we budget it. And we budget it with the money we have. Which this,
Or
These
that we
vests
know
are
we can
surprisingly
bring
warm.
in
or we know we can bring.
I've never actually worn a
Yes.
vest before.
some sort of,
Where it's at, I mean, like, I don't wanna go 2 million in deficit just to do those things.
but
Makes me sick. Millions of dollars this town has for emergency, because we are about to hit potential recession. And that happens if you're not paying the property taxes.
it'll be interesting now.
People lose their homes, all sorts of things, so it's just.
Okay, so everybody ready? Well, we have Lisa Bloomquist Palmer here with the Homes Fund. She's going to give a presentation.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate being here. My name is Lisa Bloomquist. I'm the Executive Director for Homes Fund. Homes Fund is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're based in Durango. We serve Southwest Colorado, including all of La Plata County, Montezuma, Dolores, San Juan, and Archuleta counties as well. And our mission is to build stronger communities through providing the educational and financial resources for people to reach homeownership. So I'm here to talk to you about deed-restricted housing and to ask for your input and maybe even decisions regarding the Cinnamon Heights deed restrictions as we go through how those are going to look. So next page, please. So this is just an overview. I'm going to go over general deed restriction information, going to touch on the deed restricted housing that we have here in Bayfield, the Fox Farm community, and then I'm going to go over recommendations and discussions. I found a pen. Next slide. So just generally, what is the need that deed restrictions are addressing and what are deed restrictions? So I think that we all know that home prices have been rising rapidly and wages are not keeping up with the high home prices. And so what do we do about that? There are several ways to approach this problem, and deed restrictions are one of the ways to approach the problem. Where basically we are taking housing and saying this housing needs to be set aside as permanently affordable. The unit itself is set aside as permanently affordable. And so that unit needs to be subsidized in price, and that subsidy needs to run with the unit and the way that we keep that home affordable and keep the restrictions on that particular home is through filing a deed restriction in public records. So deed restrictions often limit the purchase price of the home, the future sales price of the home, the income of the home buyer household, homeowner residency, homeowner employment, and other restrictions for specific programs. And we're going to be going over those items later in this presentation. Next slide. So the existing deed-restricted homes in the town of Bayfield are in the Fox Farm community. And there are probably several of you in this room who remember the history of Fox Farm far better than I do. I've only been in the community for about 5.5 years. But basically several nonprofit builders got together to build the Fox Farm homes. Habitat for Humanity is still building homes over in Fox Farm. And all home buyers must be income qualified in order to buy a home in Fox Farm. They also must occupy the home as their primary residence, and when they sell, they also must sell to someone who is income qualified and who is going to occupy the home as their primary residence. They can't sell to an investor. There are no price or appreciation caps on the Fox Farm homes. They were seen as being kind of a naturally affordable housing product. And for a long time, I would say that worked quite well. I would say that the Fox Farm community was really kind of a poster child for a very light touch deed restriction, where people were still able to gain appreciation, except it was naturally affordable housing. However, next slide, the homes in Fox Farm are now selling for $300,000, more or less. And given our high interest rates right now of 5%, a household would need to make at least $75,000 a year in order to afford one of the Fox Farm homes. And so it's losing its affordability.
And rates are 7.6.
And rates, that 5% was when I made this a couple months ago. Yeah, and so those interest rates really, really matter, and it's eroding affordability. So yeah, houses selling for $300,000 it's no longer naturally affordable housing, which is really unfortunate, frankly. We're still getting people in to those homes. A lot of people who are buying the Fox Farm homes are getting mortgage assistance from Homes Fund, and so that helps. But basically, not having price restrictions on those the market has done what the market has done for those homes, along with all the other homes in the area. So next slide, I just wanted to go over with you a little bit about what we're talking about when we're talking about different income levels and different price points that are affordable at various income levels. So if you look at this max AMI, AMI stands for area median income. If you look at the 80% row, that's 80% of area median income by household size. And so most federal programs, if you're using CDBG, which stands for Community Development Block Grant, or home money, the funds are going to be restricted for use for households with incomes below 80% of area median income. So that top row, household of 4, 80% AMI, $78,450. If we're assuming 5% interest rates, which like Trustee Moreland just pointed out, those are no longer the case anymore. If we're looking at a 30-year amortizing loan, 30% of income spent on housing, a 3% down payment, and including some assumptions on taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance, and a $100 a month HOA due, that household of 4 making up to $78,450 could afford a $315,000 home. I'm not going to go over every single line in those, but later on I am going to ask you your input about, do we want to focus the deed restrictions on households that are below 80% of area median income? Do we want to go up to 100% of area median income, up to 125% of area median income? These are decisions that certainly need to be made. If you limit the prices to folks, or the availability to people who are under 80% of area median income, it's of course targeting the people who need the housing the most and who need the subsidy the most. But if we're limiting the housing to people who are under 80% AMI, then the market is more severely limited when they go to sell. So, pros and cons. Everything has its pros and cons. The next slide just demonstrates the gap in between workforce wages and home prices. Basically, big picture of this is, if you look at the red, that's where there is a gap. And we've got a lot of red on that slide. There is a fairly large gap, especially for folks who are at that 80% AMI level and below. Next slide shows that if we're making some assumptions about the pricing on On a deed restricted home, that the pricing would be in between $200,000 and $400,000, $200,000 for a studio, $400,000 for a 4-bedroom house. It decreases the gap pretty significantly. Those numbers have gone down quite a bit, but it actually doesn't get rid of the gap entirely. For, let's say a single person household at 80% of area median income, there's still a gap for those folks. But, we're using the tools that we have, right? So, price point considerations. If the homes may only be purchased by households with incomes below 80% of area median income, they need to be priced below $300,000. If we want the income thresholds to be 100% of area median income, could go up to $400,000. This is highly dependent on interest rates, though. Okay, these prices are definitely dependent on interest rates. And something that I do want to point out is that deed restrictions, they're limiting the marketability and the sellability of a home. Of course they are. That's part of the point of having the deed restriction. And so in order for people to accept the deed restriction, the home needs to be priced at least 20% below the price of a comparable market rate property. Okay? If you have two homes that are exactly the same right next to each other, one is market rate, one has a deed restriction on it, the deed restricted house will need to be priced at least 20% below that same market rate price. That makes sense to everyone? Yeah. So the subsidy, the next slide, and I'm going fairly fast through these so that we could really get to the discussion. So the subsidy on a deed restricted home needs to be at least that 20% gap between the purchase price and the market rate purchase price and the deed restricted price. But often it's going to need to be more than that. And cost of land and infrastructure are also public subsidies. And part of what the deed restriction is protecting is that public subsidy that's going into these homes. We don't want someone to just make an individual windfall and for the community to be losing their affordable housing. And I also just want to commend the town council and for putting in this subsidy. You guys are putting in a lot of money and effort into the Cinnamon Heights community, and that subsidy is needed. Deed restricted projects don't work if you don't have some sort of local subsidy put into it. So next slide, please. Another thing to consider is that deed restrictions need to be written in a way and administered in a way that is acceptable to mortgage lenders. Because if it's not, then people will not be able to get financing. And if people can't get financing, then they can't buy the house. Pretty simply. We need to work within the system that exists out there. At the very least, we need to play by lenders' rules. One of the rules that most lenders are going to put on the program is that they will not accept deed restrictions that do not drop off in the case of foreclosure. So they want their collateral to be unencumbered by the deed restriction if they do go through foreclosure. And so kind of is what it is.
I'm sorry.
So if a home goes through foreclosure, then the deed restriction would drop off and the bank would be able to sell the home as a market rate home. And they're going to require that. Mm-hmm. So there are things that we could do to step in and buy the house before it gets sold on at market rate, but that's, to be completely honest with you, I'd say that's a bridge we should put the infrastructure in place for the bridge that we're going to cross over a little later. But, you know, like I've said several times throughout this presentation, we do need to do what we can to protect this public infrastructure and not have it lost to the bank or to an individual. So the next slide are the things that I'm going to ask for your input about. And do you want me to just go over everything and then get input, or do you want me to have it be more conversational at this point?
So I'd really like discussion from the board, kind of here at the end. And at the very end of the next agenda or regular meeting, they can actually give staff direction if there's something that they've thought about through this presentation. You're certainly welcome to stay, but I wanted to make sure that they had some chance to kind of go through this presentation. But you're doing a great job at this point. So.
Great. Time is okay?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So some of the common requirements for deed restricted housing are that the home be the primary residence and the primary residence of the owner, and that they occupy it for a certain threshold of time. We don't want these homes to be investment properties. We don't want people to be, traveling around Thailand and say like, oh, I'm coming back, so therefore it's my primary residence. We want to make sure that it's people who are members of our community, who are living in our community, who are accessing these properties. Homes.
Sorry, are we discussing as we go on, or are we waiting till the end? Is that? Can I just throw it out? Like,
Sure.
What's you're giving somebody 2 months out of the year. Like, what's a scenario that that's okay?
If they're a teacher, so
Okay.
they
Or a travel nurse,
they have
took a-
summers
okay.
off, and my husband's a
I'm
teacher.
just
He went to
thinking, like,
Germany for a month
yeah,
this
subleasing and-
summer.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to have some sort of flexibility. Okay. We don't want to say like, you need to be sleeping in this bed 24 365. It's just a bit too strict. But we do need to have something in place to make sure that they don't say like, oh, primary residency is just an intention to come back. So there needs to be some tightness to it, but not,
So
365.
Fannie Mae mortgage guidelines require 51% or more occupancy to be considered a primary residence. So it would be a secondary residence if you live there 50% of the time. I think that number should be higher than 51% in order to, be a deed restriction.
In
Otherwise,
order
it's
to
just a mortgage
get
thing.
subsidized housing, yeah. Like we don't want people to be getting subsidized housing that are
That can afford secondary homes.
yeah.
Honestly.
Yep, exactly. So, this number of 10 months a year, there's some flexibility on that if you guys strongly object, but kind of recommend
Well, I
10
guess
months seems
where's the
good.
accountability? Like, if someone's there 10 months, but they're off and on, like, it can't be exactly 10 months, can it? Like,
To be honest with you, it's pretty hard to monitor exactly.
Yeah.
We're not going to
Yeah.
we're not going to
Yeah.
be having people track every moment that they're in the house, right?
Yeah, I guess
But we do an annual audit of all of our mortgage assistance recipients to make sure that they are still occupying the house and that it is still their primary residence.
Okay.
I think we want to have a number in there to go back to some sort of enforcement mechanism. Not so we could say, well, you were gone for 61 days, not. And that's over the threshold, like that. We don't want the minutia to bog us down, but we also do want to have some sort of a number so that we can enforce the spirit of this.
And a lot of
it
times,
makes sense.
the threat of it, of knowing that if that's not your primary residence, that you could lose your home, is enough. People don't do stuff like that. Because in all honesty, like in all the mortgages that I've seen and done in my past to help people, that that's in their agreements, that if you're not living there in your primary residence, they can call the note due and payable. Well, I'm sure the deed restriction is something similar, where you lose your home. If you're not living there as your primary residence, you would have to sell it at that point, I would think.
So I've
Something
skipped
along
ahead a
those
little bit, and maybe if we went through more of these points, because you have workforce requirements, and they have to have been here a year and employed within the 5-county region. So, I mean, that you will have access to knowing, like, where people are employed, and then if some of these jobs are more like out-of-town like, you'll be able to tell. So it's not, like, I'm just thinking it's not going to be, like, impossible to figure this out.
A lot of times just sending a piece of mail that says return service requested, which means that the mail doesn't get forwarded, it gets returned back to the person who sent it, which banks do quite often.
Yeah.
We would know right away if they weren't accepting their own mail.
And that's part of our audit, yeah. And fairly simple things like that. And most people are going to be honest, but we do want to have some sort of mechanisms for catching the people who are trying to use
Buck the system.
Use this program for their own purposes rather than for.
Yeah, you're trying to
Public
prevent
safety.
Airbnbs happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like people going on vacation for 9
Yeah.
months out of the year and renting out their property to
Yeah.
someone else.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I stated it in here, because kind of should be somewhat self-evident. Like, no short-term rentals. Like, that's not what this program is for. That's not what this housing is for, right? So, so I'm getting the feeling that you all are okay with residency and occupancy restrictions in 10 months. Sounds okay.
Yep.
Okay. Home buyer income and assets. We need to decide the income thresholds. I mean, I don't know if we need to decide tonight, but if we make the income thresholds lower at, let's say, 80% of area median income, we're helping people who need the subsidy more. But we're limiting the market more. And frankly, people who are at 100% of area median income and even 120% AMI are still struggling to find and afford a home right now in this community. So, so there are pros and cons. Also, more subsidies are going to be available if you limit the incomes to folks who are under 80% AMI. And some of this, to be honest with you, might be out of all of our hands. It depends on what grants you guys end up getting. If you get grants that say that the final homeowners and the final recipients need to be under 80% AMI,
Well, I have a question for you.
that's what we got to do.
Because we've had such a change in our economy lately. Are you finding that people are falling more into that 80% AMI now because of everything that's going on? Or do you still think, because I know originally our intention was workforce. It wasn't necessarily like your lower income people that we were targeting, but more of, your police officers, your firemen, your teachers, and, your workforce rather than your low income. But I'm wondering if they are starting to fall into more of your 80% AMI because of what's going on in our economy right now.
Well, the AMI figures don't catch up quite that fast.
Not fast? Okay.
Yeah,
That
like
was my
they
question.
are annual. They are published annually, but I think that they're based on like 18 months ago. So it's like it doesn't, maybe even 24 months ago. Like it doesn't catch up as fast
Okay.
as the
I wasn't sure how
economy
often
is
they did
actually
that, or-
is actually changing. Yeah, these AMI figures are published by HUD annually, and they're by household size, which is good because, I mean, obviously a household of 6 needs more money and more of a house to function than a household of 1 does, right? Like this, it just makes sense. But to be honest with you, we've generally been increasing our AMI thresholds because frankly, people
Can't
who are
even help anybody.
at 120% AMI still can't afford a house. And there's the Venn diagram, right? There's the you need to be low income enough to gain access to the programs, but you need to have enough income that you can get a mortgage.
Right, it's such
And
a,
that
like
and
this
and
little
and
itty-bitty
that
line
and
of
that
people.
that Venn diagram is getting so small for people who are under 80% AMI that we're increasing our income limits for our mortgage assistance program to, make that overlap so that we can serve the community.
right.
Make the
That
math
was my
work.
question
The
too,
grant
because,
that we're applying for right now does cover up to 120.
okay.
I think I'd like to know a little bit more about our community and what our pay range is.
We just looked up teachers.
Oh, yeah,
Maybe.
teachers, when you're saying teachers, firefighters, I mean, we know town staff, I mean, we could have our own survey for what we're paying town staff, but I think ultimately that was the goal, was to support people who can live and work in Bayfield. So what are some of these basic jobs paying? Because that might help drive if we want to be at that 80% or the 125%. Because if
Right.
all the firefighters are, making $105,000 a year, which I'm not sure that's quite true, but then we want to, if that's our target audience, is fire and EMS or law enforcement or teachers, we need to make sure that we're hitting that target. Otherwise, it's like Brenda said, what income are we going for?
And can we set aside like 4 units to be, do they all have to be 80%? Or can we say,
So they all, I apologize, I didn't put in 120 rather than 125. I should have done 120 because they all do need to be under 120 because of this grant that Nicole just mentioned. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So,
so,
I mean, that's pretty cool.
so we have some choices. I mean, when you're looking at incomes of, let's say teachers or law enforcement, of course, the single teachers and the single law enforcement officers and especially the single parents who are in those professions, they of course matter, but we also need to understand that a lot of people have dual income households as well. Some people do, and so, it's not the full picture just looking at one person's income sometimes.
Oh, this 110 could be 2 people's income.
Right. Easily.
That's why I would like to know a little bit more about
Yeah.
what
The Bayfield teacher schedule starts at, oh gosh,
37,000.
yeah, 37,000, and it only goes, 30 steps later with a master's degree only goes up to 71,000.
Yeah. So a one-person household who's a teacher at the end of their career, they'd barely be at this 80% AMI threshold.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying, if we could set aside a certain amount of units to make sure that we're still
So-
qualifying for a grant, going with the higher AMI, but I don't want to give them all, I don't know.
Well, we had
That's-
talked about if there were some, even if we had staff moving into town who needed, maybe it's just housing for a year until they can kind of get settled, and I don't know. I just know there were many options that we had Katie, weren't they all named after submarines or
Oh, that went away.
or Navy ships?
So
I know.
Yeah.
Are
I think
able to
setting,
do that?
yeah, I think setting aside, some of the units to be for people who are under 80% AMI, is fine. Setting aside others for people who are under 120% AMI. That's a fine thing to do. One thing that, just administratively and communication-wise, it's a little bit difficult when different units are priced differently.
Right, that's what I
You
was
know,
wondering. It's
like we're saying like, okay, well, here's an affordable housing unit that's, $275, and here's one that's $399. Like, and they're the same unit. The communication on that can be difficult. It's not impossible. The people can understand that.
It depends on qualifications.
That it depends. Right. People can get that, but it does create a little bit of like, I don't know.
But couldn't we price it price the houses accordingly that would fit somebody who's at that 80% AMI, but yet allow people that are up to 125% AMI still buy that home for that same price.
Yep.
So it's not like you're leaving out the lower and the higher, or one or the other, by choosing
that's
the
what I
AMI,
was trying to
right?
figure
Isn't
out.
that
That's-
something you could
Sure,
do?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of best of both worlds.
That's
You know,
what I
like
was
if you, but you're, like the only argument kind of against that is that you're subsidizing someone who's at, 125% AMI as if they're at 80% AMI.
Right.
But,
But
nothing
neither
is
one
going to
of
be
them can
perfect.
get houses right now.
Right.
I mean,
And neither one can get a house right now, and nothing's going to be perfect.
Right.
So, yeah, sure, that could work. So, and frankly, like you just said, none of them can get houses right now. So if we pick the higher threshold, is it going to be okay? Yes. And especially if we subsidize it at a level and price the homes at a level so that even the lower income folks could do
afford to
it,
get in,
could afford to get in.
Important to add to the conversation too is, we don't know what we're gonna be able to sell these units for once we
Right.
pay for, once we get the grants and pay for infrastructure and all of that, and then the construction costs still need to add into it. We need to have some flexibility pricing it to where it's appropriate based on what some of those costs are. So we
Right, I
need
mean, we
to
can't sell it for less than we can,
Well, what if like the mortgage to income ratio is just the same across the board? I mean, yeah, you're gonna pay more if you're under the 120%, but that ratio is still the same, so it's still the same affordability. If you make more money than the
It's like a
people.
sliding
will-
scale.
It like that makes
Like-
it really hard to administer. Like
Yeah.
how
That
how
was
how
the
do you
whole
how
point.
how do you how do you know
can't.
how much you can sell your house for? Like how are you, let's say you bought one of these units and then you wanted to sell it later on. How in the world would you know what the price was if it was based on someone's income?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it stayed, yeah, you're right. It would be really difficult to administer that.
I think it's easier just like if you open it up to both the 80% and the 120%, and then you just lottery it. So maybe you have, 10 or 5 houses that go to somebody who's at the 80% level, and 5 houses that somebody goes to at the 90% level, or, so on and so forth. And instead of just being like, okay, first come, first serve, and all of them end up being, the 120%. That way you're being equitable to all of
A range.
the ranges.
Lisa, what happens if you're this household of 3 at the 80% and you get married and now your income doubles? Like, do you automatically have to sell your house?
No, no. We're going to do all of the qualification determination
Yeah.
prior to purchase. After someone purchases, we want people to build wealth. We want people to, grow their wealth, grow their family,
Okay.
et cetera. And also foreclosing on someone and forcing them to sell because they got a raise. No.
No, I just.
Just no. like that just,
It's
Yeah.
just like any other place that you could buy a home, and, you and your spouse bought the house together and you made a certain income, and then one of you guys lost your job, and now you're really stretching, but you're making your mortgage payments, but, you don't lose, your
But
mortgage
at the end of the
doesn't
day, you're
change for
still,
that.
it's
You know,
still
it's the
deed
same thing.
restricted and you're still
Yeah.
selling at the same, so.
Right.
okay.
right, exactly.
So
Like,
it's the getting the foot in the door.
maybe someone who's in that position where, let's say their household income doubled, maybe they would take a look at this deed restriction and say, hey, wait a second, like I'm not going to be able to gain the equity on this that I could on a market rate house. So maybe I'll sell this one and move into a market rate house. I mean, then that
Could be a stepping stone.
it could, yeah.
In their lives.
Right.
Okay.
Right, exactly. And we hope that people do that, right? And open this house back up to someone who
Needs.
needs the subsidy, right? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So along that same lines, if you have somebody that's living at one of these, they get in with, qualifying for one person, and then they get 3 roommates in there. That's acceptable too, right?
Well, that's
Subleasing,
something that's up for discussion. I mean, for our mortgage assistance program, that's okay with us. We don't, in part because it's really onerous and contentious to limit something like that. But there are other affordable homeownership programs that say, like, no, like if they're not a family member, if you're not expanding your family, like, no, you can't make money off of a room.
Okay.
That's something for discussion. It is hard to administer, though.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
there's
what if a
also an
single
HOA,
person and
so
they
it's
get a
like,
boyfriend or a girlfriend and you're like, no, you can't live there. And
No, but you could be the person who's like, yeah, I'm gonna have my brother and his family, my sister and
and
his
next thing
family.
you know, there's
and
8
then
cars parked
yeah,
there,
there- yeah,
and, but that's, I know.
I mean, and some of that
Pandora's box we
gets
just
into,
opened.
and some of that gets into HOA territory, that the homeowners association will, that it's not just,
That's not
it's not
us,
the
that's
deed
just us, yeah.
restriction that's going to say no to that, or we don't have to make that determination when talking about the deed restriction. That could be part of the HOA rules, like X number of cars parked per unit.
So you have about 12 minutes before your regular meeting starts.
So,
And we're on number 2?
yeah, so we're still on number 2. I mean, personally, I like the suggestion of pricing them as if they're for folks who are at 80% AMI, but letting people go up to be eligible to purchase who are up to 120 or 125% AMI. I think that's best of both worlds and what I would recommend, but I see some nods.
Nope.
Cool.
That-
We also restrict assets for our mortgage assistance program. We don't want someone who is, it's a really big loophole if you don't restrict assets in some way, because people can have a low income and be a high asset individual. And so, and nothing wrong with those people, but they don't need very subsidized housing.
Right. I agree with that. Somebody has $5 million in stocks and bonds, they don't need our little
Right.
$300,000 house. They
I
can
mean,
go buy their own.
or even, $500,000, that this housing isn't for them.
Right.
And we can say, no, sorry, we're going to have this go towards someone who needs it a bit more.
When you look at assets, are you looking at 401Ks?
So we're
just-
looking at liquid assets.
Okay.
We have a threshold of $40,000 for liquid, and then retirement assets or real estate net worth assets of 140
I like
as a
that.
threshold.
That's pretty good.
So, yeah. And if someone has more than that, then they just need to invest it into the house.
There you go.
If you're ready, number 3, workforce requirements. There are deed restriction programs just west of here that they're over in the city of Durango. They're requiring workforce. You want to be a little bit careful of this because you don't want to run sideways of any sort of discrimination laws. There needs to be some sort of a way for people who can't work to be able to purchase these homes, because you don't want to inadvertently discriminate against someone who is disabled. But as long as you have some carve-outs for that, do you guys want to require that someone be part of our local workforce? What about people who are working remotely?
God.
It used to be that there was just income requirements. It was assumed that people worked locally.
I mean, people that are working
we
remotely
can't.
are still using, they're going to our grocery store, they're still buying things here, they're,
It's easier to just ignore the workforce requirement,
Okay.
frankly. You don't have to have a workforce requirement. There are other jurisdictions that very much wanted this workforce requirement. So,
We really need our teachers, we really need our firefighters. We need our
Yeah.
Police
I mean, I
force,
like
we
being
need our
from
town
La Plata County.
employees, you know, I mean, like,
and I do recommend that you not limit it to people who are employed right in Bayfield. Like, that's just too limiting. I'd say La Plata County, but that's my input.
Yeah, I
You
say La
can-
Plata County. I mean,
If you guys want the workforce requirement. It is a bit more difficult, but we can do it. Thoughts?
yeah.
What do you think?
I just feel like we just like
I-
stomped on an anthill here. Like I'm
I
just
agree
Yeah.
with,
so much.
I agree with La Plata County. I mean, Archuleta County is pretty close. You know, someone could work in Bayfield and live in Pagosa, so
You
I
can work in
don't,
Memphis and live in Bayfield too, and that's Montezuma County.
yeah.
I mean, that you,
Live in New Mexico
you
and work
could,
in
you
Bayfield.
could say Region 9 even, you know, just have it so that someone who works for Google, you know, isn't eligible, unless you want them to be eligible. They're still part of our community. If they're living here, they're part of our community.
So I'm gonna get you to move along so that we can
Okay.
get set back up for.
Yep, something to think about.
I
Mhm.
think you could also do somebody that's either workforce or has lived in our community for a period of time. And you could do either or. So just throwing that out.
true.
Yeah, yeah, we can
I don't
certainly,
like throwing it out yet.
yeah.
No, I
We
don't.
can-
If that's how everybody feels.
Yeah.
I'm like, I
We-
don't want to throw it out yet.
We can table things. For lending and underwriting requirements, I'm going to kind of breeze over this, but people need to be able to meet first mortgage requirements. And then we also have our Homes Fund mortgage assistance underwriting requirements. And I am happy to go over those with you guys at any time. But we do need to make sure that people are getting into a home that's affordable and sustainable, pretty much.
Part of those mortgage requirements of down payment,
Yeah.
and how big?
Yes, yes. So, so for our mortgage assistance, we require that people put in either 1% of the purchase price of their own money, or $1,000, whichever one is more. You're not going to get a house for less than $100,000 anymore. So it's 1% of the purchase price. And some of our programs require a total of 3% down, but 2% of that can be a gift. 1% does have to be from the person. So, you know, we want people to have some skin in the game. You know, this is ownership. We want people to have some sort of money in the transaction. Yeah. Any other? Okay. We also are going to recommend that you require homebuyer education and counseling. And Homes Fund does both of those things. Those are really part of our essential things that we do. Gosh, my numbering got mixed up. Sorry, go back to, next slide is back to number 1. So I guess that's number 6, is price and appreciation limitations. This, like I was saying earlier about Fox Farm, there are no price limitations on Fox Farm, and didn't think that those prices would get away from us, but they did. So, so the limitations, the pricing limitations, are typically in between 1.5% per year to 3% per year. Just simple interest by year. Oops. Calculations so that people can gain some appreciation, they can gain some equity, but they can't gain at the levels that we've been seeing, you know, where, 20, 30% per year.
Is it like 1.5% to 3%, but no more than market value? Like, you can't just say 3% every year and increase it.
So
if the market isn't doing it.
Right. So effectively, the market rate, really less that 20%, is
Right.
going to be the top. that people will be able to sell for. There are still market forces. Like if the market just crashes, and there are market rate homes that are available for less than deed restricted homes, well, frankly, that kills deed restriction programs. And that's a situation that happened, 15 years ago in 2008. The housing meltdown, a lot of deed restriction programs were just lost to that being the scenario. But compared to, we can't operate based on what happened in 2008. We need to operate based on what's happening now. And what's happening now is we're seeing home prices increase, 20% per year. And so this limits it, but it does give people some chance of some appreciation.
Yes, I don't like option 1 that Fox Farm has done. I do like option 2.
Okay. Me too. And we could decide on an exact level, anywhere in between 1.5% and 3%. We can decide on that. Maybe in 20 minutes, maybe some other time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the eligible home buyers, Homes Fund will take all of the deed restriction criteria, and we will issue a certificate to people to make sure that they meet the eligibility criteria. And if an ineligible person takes ownership, then I suggest that there be something in the deed restriction that says you have to sell. You're not eligible to take ownership of the home. Sorry. You just can't take ownership. So, unit sale and marketing. So basically using realtors to sell these homes. Realtors are great. They're also expensive. But if you don't use a realtor, if you're the seller, that there aren't any legal issues. But Homes Fund is not a licensed real estate broker. We do not have any licensed realtors or real estate brokers on staff, and so we cannot act in that role. And there have been some other nonprofits that have gotten into trouble with the Department of Regulatory Affairs for acting as a realtor when they're not, and I don't want to get into trouble for doing that. And so there are some kind of ins and outs about how these units are going to be sold.
I very much promote us using a realtor.
And, some communities, what they've done is just made a deal with someone, with a particular realtor, and said, okay, like rather
You get
than
to list all these and you get X amount.
rather
and it's a
than
little bit less,
like
yeah.
the 5% that's standard, like we're going to negotiate a rate that's lower. And I'm not sure if the town could put out an RFP for something like that. Maybe a realtor would be willing to do it by the hour. I
We're
feel
at
like that's
7:30.
a much larger
And
discussion.
so the last slide is actually on the back of the packet for the Board of Trustees. And what I would kind of suggest is that we have an audit. We have a couple things to do on a regular meeting, and you have a lot of things to think about in the next maybe 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes at this time, so that we can get everything slid back in. Those that are on Zoom, we will terminate this Zoom and go into the regular meeting here in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, are you okay to stick around? Because
I can stick around. Yeah.
Just
yeah.
in case we have
Yeah, if you have questions.
on the next part of the agenda.
Yeah, you bet.
I know, it's a long night for everybody, just
It's a long one.
Thank you, Lisa.
buckle in.
When are they not?
I know.
I swear we've been doing 9:30, 10 o'clock for a while. And I thought we started earlier, and we changed it to an earlier time, so we get out of here earlier. And
There's a lot of stuff going on.
Till later.
Did you hear that storm the other night, Tom? It was like 3 or 4 nights ago that it sounded like people were
Are
dropping.
they giving us 5 minutes?
Yeah, everybody's got 5 minutes. We gotta put the room back
Yeah,
together.
like it woke me up.
We've got,
My dog was freaking out. Yeah, and then those thunder booms, they're the loudest I've ever heard.
They're on the Bayfield website for this meeting.
So you can bring it right
And-
there.
You have a little water right there. Oh, okay.
What's that? Something like this. Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
My brain hurts right now.
Yeah, so I figured out yesterday that I didn't get the official supervisor position. And they they promoted another guy within who has a lower certification than I do. And the guy doesn't, like a year ago, he was like, I don't want to work here anymore. And so yeah, I went into the news for that yesterday morning. I was like, cool, I've been the supervisor interim for 2 months and I've done a really good job. And all of a sudden this guy that's less certified than me picks it
Just
up.
got the,
Yeah, and he gets the phone and he gets the key card, and I'm like, I don't know what they're doing, but it's like they're playing chess up at the top. It's like whatever. I don't really care. Like I said, I'm an engineer, so I mean the wastewater plant isn't my end game for my career. Hopefully, I can get a position within the city of Durango that's an actual engineer. Like,
more what you do.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal. If that's not going to happen in the next 4 years, then I'll probably try to find an engineering job or something within Durango. But it's really hard to find a high-paying job like in the area, at least what I'm used to, Denver and Phoenix, and
Oh, yeah.
obviously it's.
Oh yeah,
But the sacrifices, I get to live in,
you get to look at the mountains. They're beautiful.
not deal with all the crap in Denver and Phoenix. Phoenix was terrible.
I mean, I can't do the city.
Yeah, I doubt I'll go back, but if I really have
We've
to.
got this back here for Ryan.
Yeah, I was trying not to put words in Ryan's mouth when they're talking for a part-time parks and facility guy. I'm like, well, let me tell you what he's going to be doing.
So I guess the TV's not working at the house.
Oh no, is everybody still alive or?
My wife set up my daughter's bouncy house in the living room.
Whatever.
A lot of fun.
We have the other
What
Zoom
about
thing
the-
coming up.
Yeah, you stick in the mud. You're just a party pooper.
The bouncy house is an outside toy. It's not in the living room.
5 and 4 happened at the same time.
And that's where we end up when I get home. Deflated and out back outside.
Not yet.
It's coming. She's already getting tired of it.
Show on the road.
Well, the heat source is on that side of the house.
Show on the road.
It's bubbling up in blankets.
It's starting to get cold. Huh? This is gonna freeze her out, huh?
And all I can say is, when she asked me to go get a blanket,
Chilly.
yeah, told you so.
I was hot until I went and washed my hands.
Oh, no. I have to ask the wife if I can have them back once in a while. You can move. But the only thing I ended up moving
Where's
was
Kristen?
the mattresses. She had the bed frames and everything already, like, moved when I got home, and the whole 9 yards, and even the clothes. I'm like, okay. I guess I'll move the mattress.
Because I was like, sure, let's just go with what we have. And,
Not like it matters to me. I mean, most of the nights I'm sleeping in my recliner.
Well, we're okay now, I'm just saying those are the types of things, like right now.
Oh, Nicole, I saw you had a little podcast or whatever with Kyle Wolf, or I haven't watched it yet, but I was like, oh, I went to school with
Wake
Kyle.
up about 2 o'clock,
Yeah.
and I'll move to the bedroom.
Is it grade before me or grade below me?
My routine.
he's a pretty cool guy.
And it's approving of someone that's.
Where's Chris?
Well, if they actually sleep without getting kicked in the face.
I'm just waiting on Kristen. I don't know where she went.
Like, that's not our call, so it's maybe a once or twice a month, someone has a concern, and then we just pass it around. and it's
Give me that look, it's just tea.
I'm exhausted today.
like- So there's no real.
I got brain fog going on.
Never helps you get by.
Yeah,
Lori, you ready?
cool, all right.
You got the other Zoom land on?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's good to go in person.
Right.
Questions, I know you have this email, maybe.
Yeah. You bet.
We're good up there? We're recording, we're good? All right, I'm gonna call this meeting to order, dated October 4th, 2022. It is now 7:37. Roll call.
Trustee Ah.
Here.
Trustee Dallas. Here. Trustee Harts.
Here.
Trustee Luke.
Here.
Trustee Moreland.
Here.
Trustee Cesaro.
Here.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Here.
All present.
Would everybody please rise for the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, does the board have any conflicts of interest to announce at this time?
Yes. Well, the Hague annexation,
4A.
4A.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, moving on to general public input. If anybody from the audience would like to address the board, please state your name and address for the record, and keep it to 3 minutes.
Brian Blanchard, 627 Louisiana Drive. I just want to take my 3 minutes and talk about impact fees. I know you have a lot on your plate, more coming, but an impact fee is, as you probably know, is typically a one-time payment imposed by a local government on a property developer. The fee is meant to offset the financial impact of a new development places on public infrastructure. Public infrastructure includes roads, schools, parks, recreational facilities, water, sewage, stormwater maintenance, among other services. So I think after attending a few meetings now, it's apparent that we have a lot of those issues, and how are we going to pay for it? So, and that's kind of your job. And I know stormwater is a biggie right now, and how are you going to pay for that? And detention ponds and other things. So impact fees are a popular alternative to raising property taxes to pay for new infrastructure. People in a developing area would rather see the developer pay an impact fee. This is because the developer is forced to cover the cost of the new infrastructure necessitated by the development rather than the taxpayers already living there. When impact fees are used in conjunction with a good comprehensive plan and a sound capital improvement plan, they can be an effective tool for ensuring adequate infrastructure to accommodate growth where and when it is anticipated. Impact fees can be an effective tool in guaranteeing adequate infrastructure to accommodate and facilitate new growth into the future. So a lot of times people think of impact fees as, oh, the developer really doesn't pay for that, the individual pays for it as that price is passed along. And that's true to an extent, although the developer has to come up with that money in the front end based on the current market. And the thing is that if we provide good infrastructure, good roads, good schools, good parks, those things, other developers will want to come in on that. So indirectly, yes, it's a fee, but it builds off of itself. And I encourage the Planning Commission and town trustees to adopt new impact fees on current and future developments. Currently, we don't have many impact fees, and you're probably aware there's a couple, and that's it. Other municipalities that I've looked at, from Carbondale to Basalt to Aspen to Buena Vista, on, have multiple impact fees to help keep up with the costs of what we're going to need going forward. So think about those things as they arise, but I know you're working on the budget. Seems like an appropriate time to look at some of those things being put into place. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? All right. Did everybody get a chance to look at the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Aw.
Yay.
Trustee Dallison. Here, I'm sorry. Yes. We are not doing a roll call.
Yes.
Trustee Luke.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Tischer for our swearing-in ceremony this evening.
I have the honor and privilege of introducing Deputy Mac Agos and participating in his affirmation of public office. We're really fortunate to have Matt with us. He brings a lot of experience from other agencies. He worked in the Southern Youth Detention Center, on patrol with the Southern Youths, and most recently with Mines and McLaren. His dad spent about 17 years in law enforcement, and Matt enjoys a lot of activities in the outdoors, hunting, fishing, camping, spending time with his family. This is his wife, Babe, and his 2-year-old son, Gunnar.
And that's Daddy.
I state your name. I, Nancy Dragos, do state your affirmation. I swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States. Support the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the State of Colorado. Constitution of the State of Colorado. And the laws of the State of Colorado. And the laws of the State of Colorado. And will faithfully perform the duties. And will faithfully perform the duties. Of the office of Deputy Marshal. Of the office of Deputy Marshal. Upon which I am about to enter. Which I am about to enter. To the best of my ability. To the best of my ability.
Thank you, Matthew. Welcome to the team. We're very happy to have you here.
Very honored to be here.
And yeah, you guys can head out or you can stick around for this one, but you're probably already tired. All right, did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes from September 20th?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from September 20th, 2022.
I second that.
All right, any further discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Aw.
Yay.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Harts.
Yes.
Trustee Luke.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Abstain.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
6 in favor, 1 abstain.
All right, we'll move on to our Parks and Recreation Director report. Do you have any highlights you'd like to share with the board tonight?
Yeah, so as far as programs go, We just finished registration for our 5th and 6th grade basketball. We got about 40 kids signed up for that, so that's a little bit more than what we had last year. And we're in the final couple weeks of our fall sports with soccer and flag football wrapping up on October 15th. As far as parks go, we're prepping for irrigation water to be shut off, restrooms to be winterized, and sprinkler lines to be winterized. We're got the air compressor scheduled for October 10th, so we already have the porta potties in place in the parks for Eagle and Joe Stevenson, and they'll remain there till early November, you know, just kind of gauge that by the weather. We assisted with the Heritage Days on September 24th here at Joe Stevenson, and also coordinated with the fire department and our fireworks crew for the fireworks that evening. And then the homecoming parade, we kind of assisted with that on this past Friday. On Mill Street, the senior center is doing well ever since we started up congregate meals again. We've seen an increase in participation. Carrie Kirkpatrick, our senior center coordinator, she's doing a great job just kind of getting things back up and running again to where we'd like to see it. We've probably seen, I don't know, 35 to 50 people on Wednesdays and Fridays for meals, and you know, we've got a good consistent group of about 20 people or so on Tuesdays as well. And then we did receive a quote from Durango Decks for repairing the railing on the deck at the senior center, which I think you saw in your packet. I think we're going to talk about that later. And does anybody have any questions?
Well, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our town manager report. Katie?
So I don't necessarily have a report, but I do have items regarding the employee handbook draft changes. The significant things is adding a July 4th makeup day. In other words, there's a holiday, and then there's also, most of the staff works on 4th of July because it's a town event, and then a makeup day sometime of that week. Also, looking at Cabrini Day, the first Monday in October, or Indigenous Peoples Day. The Cabrini Day is a state holiday, Indigenous Peoples Day is a federal holiday, and neither, and the federals do not recognize Cabrini Day, and the state does not recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. However, I think they have a celebration in a separate system. We're looking at maybe part-time employees, actually identifying when part-time employees would actually get benefits, and that's in the document. The other document, and the most significant thing is going to paid time off, or PTO. The paid time off is following probably the employees have had this discussion, the leadership team has had this discussion about PTO time. That would eliminate sick and wellness time. And a sick and wellness time, there's quite a few employees that have sick and wellness banks. And we would probably either have to put that separate and make sure that there's a sickness wellness bank, or have some type of way to pay that out. If you leave employment, at this time, you don't leave with any of your sickness and wellness. Basically, you lose that time if you leave employment. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to take a look at those pages regarding PTO time and paying out the leave bank. So we're talking about possibly reducing, if somebody voluntarily decides to get their leave bank paid out, we would reduce the leave bank by 50% and then pay them out at their current rate at this time. And then that would remove, our goal obviously is, and if there's employees that want to keep their sick bank, they can keep that. We're not going to, it'd be a voluntary payout. We did do a calculation of how much that would be. All of the sick time was about $140,000. If you reduce that by half, it's about $70,000. So that's what that liability would be if you paid out those sick time banks for every employee that has accrued that amount.
Katie, can I ask a question about
Yes.
that? Sorry, I don't know if this is appropriate time, but if you're taking vacation and you're taking sick and you're combining to make PTO, and so I know what I have seen is that you can keep that sick time in a bank for the duration of your employment, and then when you leave, it's not something that's paid out because you switched over to sick time, or you switched over to PTO. But if you were, vacation time is always able to be paid out, but that sick time was not, so.
The sick time is not paid out currently right now.
Yeah, so
Our goal is to reduce the hassle of trying to keep track of multiple old and new pots of time off.
No, I understand that, but did I hear you say that one of the options could be to pay out the sick time?
One of the options would be that the employee would have 60 days from the time this is adopted to voluntarily ask to be paid out, and it would reduce a lot of confusion about who has sick time, who has a bank, who has not. That's still your
Okay.
decision. It's
Okay.
not, it's an option. It's not necessarily something that we're saying, these are all draft. And then looking at medical time off, we are exempt from a Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, because we have less than 50 employees. And so if there is a serious situation, maybe, employee has there's a new child, whether adopted or natural child, there would be some additional medical time off. So in other words, they've exhausted all the other pay time off that they have. And this would be so basically serious situations. Currently, your sick time allows you to accumulate up to 720 hours. So we're trying to kind of balance that, giving them another option that would be provided for them, for employees. Most of these are basically just corrections, excuse me, and updates that just needed to be done in the employee handbook. But I certainly encourage you to go through those pages and take a look at what we're drafting. Obviously, the employees, we would like to consider this effective December 3rd. And the reason it would be December 3rd is that would be the start of a new pay period. And so we're not halfway in a pay period deciding how to do half a PTO and half a vacation and half a whatever. And then the next thing is Sergeant Abdallah's retirement letter, which is in your packet.
All right, any questions? Comments? We have our new website status update.
Well, this has been kind of a nightmare. First of all, it was a struggle to get back to all the training, and one of the training requirements was I also had to be trained in Civics Plus as well. So I got that done, but then for some reason there was some delay from Civics Plus to get that going. So our new website is active. Bayfieldgov.org. It's just like our emails, except it's our new website. And we are, for some reason, struggling to actually load the website, the new website, on our town computers. So DataSafe has been working on that. And it's an odd thing going on, but anyway, we won't be able to post anything until we can verify that everybody can open the website. So
That's interesting. He pulled it up and I
I
can't.
just pulled it up.
And I
she
can't.
didn't.
so you get to start editing and putting agendas on.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't have anything else in that.
All right, we'll move on to our disbursements and financial items. Do we have any public input pertaining to items 3A, B, or C on the agenda? See.
More like public comment at the beginning.
Oh, so that's more for our discussion on our deed restrictions. Okay. Did everybody get a chance to look over the September 2022 disbursements? Do you have anything to add to those?
I do not.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to accept the September disbursements as presented by the finance director.
I'll second that.
All right, roll call, please.
Trustee Off.
Yay.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Harts.
Yes.
Trustee Luke.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, we have an audit presentation by Hinton Burdick.
Can you see my screen?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
None of these have pages titled. Where is it? None of them. Dang it. Can't find the page.
Okay, so, yes, we're here for the 2021 audit presentation. My name is Kelly Jones. I work for Hinton Burdick as an audit manager. Because this is 2021, this is kind of more high level, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask throughout the presentation or at the end, whatever works best for you. But first off, we would just like to say thank you to the town staff for their help with the audit, providing us with the information that we needed and answering our questions. And we know it can be a hassle, so thank you to them. And then also thank you to the town board for the opportunity to serve as your auditor. You should have our audit report, our audited financial statements. Included in those audited financial statements on page 1 is our independent auditor's report. And that report, to sum up, basically says that we are issuing an unmodified or clean opinion, which just means that after everything we looked at, we believe the financial statements are materially correct as presented. Also included in our financial statements is a report on page 85. That report is the report on compliance and on internal control over financial reporting. In that report, we have to designate if we had any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We did have a material weakness this year. Last year, it was a significant deficiency. And that is relating to the journal entries and other adjustments that were needed for the audit. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Going on, we don't have a state compliance report, but we do report in the notes whether there were any issues with state compliance. In the current year, we did have 2 compliance findings. In the prior year, there were no compliance findings, just to give you that information. And there is also a letter to the board that we provided, which just has a lot of verbiage on that all misstatements have been corrected and some other verbiage, but that should have also been provided to you. So in our findings and recommendations letter, as previously mentioned, we did have a material weakness related to year-end accounting and financial statement controls. Again, that is more related to our adjustments that were needed for the audit and if they were material to the audit, which is what is causing this material weakness. Those adjustments have been provided to management, and they have posted those entries to the software, their Excel software, going forward.
We also had 2 compliance-related findings. The first has to do with budget appropriations. The garbage fund was over budget by approximately $2,000, and that can be found in the financial statements. And our second compliance finding was related to supplemental or amended budgets. Those budgets require a public hearing prior to being approved, which didn't occur during 2021. So about some financial highlights. If you look at page 18 of the financial statements, you can see the governmental funds. We would draw your attention to the net change in fund balances for those funds, for the general fund, street fund, which will show you if those funds increased or decreased. All governmental funds operated within their approved budgets. And you can see the budget and actual statements for governmental funds starting on page 66 of the financial statements. As far as the proprietary funds or the utility funds, those can be found on page 21. And at the bottom of that page, you will see a line called C changes in net position, which will again show you the increases or decreases to any of the utility funds during 2021. As previously mentioned, all proprietary funds operated within their approved budgets except for the garbage fund. And you can find those budget to actual statements starting on page 74 of the financial statements. We just have some graphs here which show where the funds ended at the end of 2021 and what their fund balance or net position looked like as it then moves into 2022, and what kind of resources you have to use in 2022. The green line, which is the most significant, is your unassigned fund balance. You can see it did decrease, but still have quite a bit of fund balance, $800,000, that is unassigned that could be used for 2022 expenditures. The blue line is assigned fund balance, which mostly relates to items that were assigned during the budget process. The $5,000 that you see there at the bottom relates to public safety. And then the red line is your restricted fund balance, which relates to the emergency reserve under state law. Best practices would be that you maintain 2 months of expenses and unassigned fund balance, and currently the general fund has over 3.5 months of expenses. So the general fund is doing well. In the street fund, again, we have the green line, which is the bottom line, is restricted. That relates to the East Intersection project, which came from a contribution from the school district. As well as in previous years, there was a restricted transfer in, and that has slowly been being used up in this fund, which is why you see the green line slightly declining each year. The blue line, it reflects the committed and assigned fund balance for those items that have been committed to street funds that are needing to be used for street funds. You can see that the street fund has assigned and committed fund balance has been increasing each year. So this fund is also doing very well. The capital improvement fund has restricted and committed assigned fund balances as well. The top line, which is the committed assigned, relates to the equipment replacement fund, which is included in here of $500,000, and other committed balances for capital projects. The restricted line you see on the bottom is what's been set aside related to park impact fees and park in lieu fees that have been accumulated but not yet used. And that's what the restricted fund balance is for the capital improvement fund. So again, there was a slight decrease, but that will happen depending on projects that are done during each given year. But this fund is still stable and healthy. For the water fund, water fund's net position is made up of 3 categories. The net investment in capital assets, which is your green line and your biggest category of net position in the water fund, which that relates to what you have tied up in capital assets, less any debt related to those capital assets. So it slightly did increase during the year just due to additions of capital assets. The blue line is your unrestricted balance, so the balances that can be carried forward into 2022 and used on operating expenses. And then the bottom line is your restricted net position, which relates to debt reserve requirements on the water loan that was issued in 2020 and then further drawn down on in 2021. That debt reserve is fully funded, as you can see there at the $164,000. Currently, the unassigned fund balance has 28 months of operating reserves that could be paid out of that unassigned fund balance. So the water fund is doing well and is healthy and has a good trend. Same thing for the sewer fund. It has those 3 categories, the top line being what's tied up in capital assets. It hasn't changed very much, but has increased slightly, again, just due to additions of capital assets versus depreciation and debt transactions. The red line in the middle is the unrestricted, which has improved $44,000 and is currently sitting at about 20 plus months of operating reserves in unrestricted. And then the bottom line is the restricted, again relating to debt service reserve requirements on the 2 sewer debts that are outstanding. And those are fully funded. And then we just have a cash balance trend, both cash for governmental funds and proprietary funds or business type funds have increased from the prior year. The governmental cash is up about $327,000 and the proprietary cash is up about $553,000. So doing well, the town seems to have plenty of cash on hand to pay for any expenses. Is there any questions? And I can answer now, or we've also provided our contact information for myself and Chad Atkinson, who is the partner for the town's audit.
Board have any questions?
I don't have any
No
questions.
All right, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me.
So we just got that PowerPoint today. Did the board want a copy of that, or I could just email it to?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could email it to us,
Okay,
that'd be
all
great.
right, I'll do that.
We had to do a little shuffling around to try to follow, so it was, yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, I couldn't see some of it because
Yeah, no, I'll just
it's too
email
light,
it.
too light of a color used.
Okay, let me get back to,
So we have typically in a year, we would go through the process of accepting the audit and then approving the audit at a different meeting because it was due September 30th. And if we didn't submit it September 30th, from our understanding that the county would be notified that we were delinquent in our audit. And so we did spend 3 days going through some, especially the garbage fund, which was amazing, just between WCA and GFL, that change and determining why it was over budget. And our response is that we did not get the December bill of 2021 until March of 2022. So there was a lot of a lot of delay. And we also had a very complex error on their part that we had to correct. So anyway, I think we got to the bottom of that. But anyway, unless you would like to go through the process of approving, accepting and approving at a later date, that's certainly up to you.
I don't need to accept and approve it at a later date. We accept and approve it now.
Yeah.
Yep. I would entertain a motion if,
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to accept the 2021 audit presentation by Hinton and Burdick.
I second that motion.
all right, any further discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Aw.
Yay.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Harts.
Yes.
Trustee Luke.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, we're gonna move on to the senior center deck quote. Ryan, did you want to head this one up?
Yeah, I'll head, between Ryan and myself, I want to thank Ryan for kind of moving ahead and looking for a deck. I actually got all those coupons in the mail, and I said, oh, by gosh, there's a deck. coupon in there.
Get the deck.
Deck company.
So I handed it to Ryan, and so I really appreciate him moving forward and getting a quote. And I really appreciate the fact that they've given us some options. I haven't seen the fascia. Ryan did express his concern that the fascia is already warped. It's going to have to be replaced at some point anyway. And in my opinion, I prefer the wired inserts versus the 2x4s because there is so much scenery and it is beautiful out there. And really, even though you can still see through it, it'd be nice to have that there. And it's, it is a little bit more. I want to make sure that you're aware that we do have a budget, that we budgeted for some capital improvements in the senior center that have not taken place. The door and this are within the budget for capital improvements at the senior center. And I'll let Ryan update you on anything from the timeline or whatever else.
Yeah, the only thing I really have to add is, luckily the company was very responsive. I couldn't find anybody else locally that just was doing decks. Most contractors are pretty busy right now. But they said as soon as we move forward and approve, they're about 2 weeks out from doing it. So it should be a pretty quick project to get them in and get it finished. I believe we have to, their contract said to pay half up front for materials and then half when the project is completed.
Any questions from the board?
Who is this quote from?
Jason, Durango Decks?
Oh, Durango Decks. I was like looking for a logo.
So, I'm not seeing this as an action item, but can we?
It is. It's
It
on
is,
the
okay.
agenda. I wasn't too sure what you would
Okay.
wanted to do with it, but it's on the agenda. You can't take action on it.
Oh, well, I would like to make a motion that we move forward with option A, adding in the fascia for a total of $14,800 from the quote that Ryan received to replace the senior center deck.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Aw.
Yay.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Harts.
Yes.
Trustee Luke.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, we're moving on with our action agenda. Do we have any public input pertaining to items for A, B, or C on the agenda? Seeing none, we will excuse Trustee Aw. And we'll go on to Resolution 537, the Haga annexation petition.
So this is a request from Charlie Albert to start the annexation process. So if you accept the petition, then we start going through the process, and there will be public hearings
Do we have any questions, comments? Pretty kind of straightforward process in the.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 537 regarding the Haga annexation public hearings,
Petition.
or the petition.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Harts.
Yes.
Trustee Luke.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
We'll get Tom back in. Then we'll move on to our B. Frank special event liquor license use of Mill Street for October 22nd.
So, this, is the use of Mill Street actually for this, their special event, which is on the 22nd of October. And, we did want kind of a little clarification of what they want from the town regarding barriers or, the street. And I really think that your approval of the street is one thing. I think that, we were talking about 2022, understanding what some of these special events cost us. And then next year, determining whether or not we continue, I mean, we don't mind, but keep in mind, it's a fiscal responsibility that you have. If we put barriers out and have staff out there to pick them up and move them around, that all is a cost to the town for somebody else's special event.
So let me just, tonight, we're just strictly voting on the use of Mill Street.
That's correct.
I mean, I think we're kind of gathering an idea, right? Are they going to be using barriers?
Says it.
They requested barriers.
Okay.
They requested staff, special liquor license
See,
permit,
okay, that's-
traffic barriers, signage. They asked for all of it. I know last year we took a little bit different stance for this event. Some of the barricades and traffic control was provided by a traffic control company in town. So, I mean, it's really up to you guys how much you want participation for the road blockage and the road closures.
And you have staff that's on overtime. I mean, it's not, it's
Yeah, it's
a
outside of
Saturday.
hours
It's-
and everything.
Yeah.
I would rather
So-
not.
What kind of liability do we have, though? Like, if the car comes down Mill Street
Yeah,
and
that's
piles
what I
out
worry
a bunch
about.
of people, do we have?
That's why they should go to alert and get basically,
And let them
they
do-
have insurance, they actually provide an insurance certificate.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they raise a lot of money for this event. I completely understand it, but like you said, I think we need to get away from town staff having to, especially if it's overtime, having to provide all of the extras.
Yeah, but do we start that on this
Yeah,
event,
I
or do we
know.
start it on future events? So we pre-warn our constituents that,
To the liability
gonna
issue,
change.
There is a certificate of insurance that they have provided naming the town of Bayfield as
Right.
additional insured. So that is provided as part of your packet already for this year, so I just want you to be aware.
When we I'm sorry, I wasn't able to participate in Heritage Days because I was working, but that event was on the softball field, right? And what kind of involvement did we have in any kind, I mean, I know the sheep and the parade, but when it was just the alcohol event, what was staff's involvement in that? Out of curiosity.
Well, Ryan was there, I mean, and I think we have to have them be better prepared, sorry, I'm gonna spit these words out, get better prepared to what they want. We did have to move the beer and the beer garden basically to the concrete area because the softball field was soggy and wet, and we just didn't want them out there. Of course, we had that rain event, and we had sprinklers on, so some other things. But I think that there was probably more time spent by staff than was intended.
Okay.
Fireworks is definitely our job.
Yeah.
We understand that, but there was, I think Ryan, and he can speak for himself, I think Ryan and Mark were on all day on a Saturday.
Yeah, it ended up being like a 10-hour day for me. And part of that, it was my own inexperience. Part of that was Heritage Days, just kind of getting back up and running again with some new leadership, things like that. So, it was impossible to foresee all of the little issues that were going to come up, but I got a text at 8 a.m, that I went down and just saw one issue. Another issue that kind of kept us there all day long, just monitoring the situation, was that they decided last minute to do a rodeo event. What? So when you're trying to set up fireworks and there's a rodeo event going on right there, but with the fire department's guidance, we were able to mitigate all of that. But it wouldn't have been possible had town staff, myself, Mark, not been there all day long. So, some of it could have been mitigated. Phyllis with the Lions Club, Phyllis Rhodes, she headed up Heritage Days this year. Her and I met afterwards to just talk about next year and everything that we learned. But, the homecoming parade was kind of another, another example of, this isn't, it's not Parks and Rec's event, but it's not really any department's event, but they're asking for a lot from the town, and, we support it, but it starts to get to be a lot on staff.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with a small town and the town providing those resources, but I think it comes to a point where these other events are taking away from, and we're asking for funding, we're asking for people, we're asking for health insurance, we're asking for all this stuff, but then it comes down to it, we're spending our time with other people's basically events that take us away, or it's overtime for employees that are non-exempt. So, and the homecoming parade, I told Ryan, I said, just wait till they get to Pine Street. It'll be a congested mess, and it was. It was another congested mess. The organizer didn't want to send flyers out to the businesses, and I said, well, that's our requirement. Well, we didn't have to do it before. Well, I think there's some responsibility on our side, and I just sometimes at some point during that parade had to kind of close my eyes because there's some real liability issues. So what I've done in other communities is ask the school district for their certificate of insurance. And I'll tell you what, they change their pace really fast to say, oh, well, maybe we should be paying attention to safety and kids jumping off of and throwing candy and everything else. And I'm not saying it's not fun, but I've just had too much experience with things that went wrong. And here we would have been, I was out there, we had more staff out there with barriers. So you got to be careful what we look like, that it's our event and it's not.
How was this event, because I didn't go to the Be Frankenstein, I remember I'd heard of it. How was this hosted in the past? Like, how is what they're asking for different this year?
So I'm just going to say that, I'll just give you the excuse. I've been here since the pandemic started.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of things that changed. And I have always been a town manager that wants to support local events, but it's really up to the board to decide to fund them. And so in the past, from my understanding, and Jeremy can speak to that they just, we just signed up for everything, along with barriers and people and staff.
Well, I think the barrier thing came in the last couple of years as parades started getting, cars started driving through parades, and that was,
So
it became a public safety issue where we said, we want them to start having these barriers.
Well, typically they just drop off A-frames on the corner. And then
Yeah.
whoever
Or
was
they
working
put
the
out
event would go out and they would
trash
just
cans.
block the street. And then when they were done, they would unblock the street and, and it's really turns into a safety issue. And you've seen that come a little bit more and more in the past when we're in the street. We're really trying to concentrate on safety, traffic rated barriers, making sure that the public's staying safe. And you're seeing it more and more. That's something Brandon could probably talk a little bit more about than us. We usually defer that safety aspect to the marshals, and then we just follow their recommendations. So if they think we need traffic rated barrels, like for the 4th of July and those parades, then we're more than happy to provide them at your direction.
Ryan, have you talked to the organizers about those demands? I mean, have you?
For Be Frank,
Is the assumption that the town's just going to provide it, or have we had the discussion with them that, hey, maybe you need to go outsource this to Alert?
I haven't been involved at all with the Be Frank request. Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think something internally we probably need to talk about as staff is just kind of what, you know, because it seemed like since I've come on, you know, there were some special event requests that went directly through me, and then some others that, you know, like Be Frank, I haven't seen anything or had anything to do.
Yeah, and it's coming up so fast. I mean, I would.
And that is a hard, that was something that I was coming up against with like Heritage Days and especially the Homecoming Parade, is that, you know, they're not expecting us to change. Like when I told, you know, the teacher that had emailed me about the Homecoming Parade, I'm like, you need to reach out to everybody on Mill Street. You need to, you know, do all these other things. And she's like, we've never had to do that before. And it was like pulling teeth. So I think we need to kind of head that off early for these events.
I mean, I would just maybe reach out, and maybe it's something that Alert could do as an in-kind donation to them and come and set up and break down. I don't know. If Alert can't get there, or it's, you know, then maybe we jump in and help out. But I think we need to have a plan, definitely a plan moving forward.
Well, I think part of our problem too is that on the request form, we ask them what they need from us, and we don't have any information saying that this costs us money, you need to provide X, Y, Z. We're just not very clear on the actual request form. So I think if we're gonna, you know, change these or require, you know, that they provide more info or more people themselves to direct traffic or whatever, that we are clearer in our request form.
And you're right. This was a test year to kind of figure out, this is kind of the first year that we assumed that we could have block parties and 4th of July and Heritage Days and some of these other events. So, you know, now that we're really at the end of the events that we get involved in, you know, I think it's time to just decide what this application looks like. And in the past, in the communities that I've worked for, is we basically said, you know, staff time is this many hours. It's
right.
And it's,
if you're
can't
requesting
choose
staff, you pay this
a lower
amount.
a paid staff member over a higher one. This is the hourly rate. This is what a barrier cost. This is what we charge you because we're going to require a deposit for cones and barriers and, you know, A-frames and all that stuff. And then if they want just provided free, they come to you. I mean, I understand Alert may give it to them, but they're either looking for a sponsorship or that's in the business they're in. They're gonna want it paid.
Even because I remember I was on a safety committee for Snowdown, and even there, I'm just pulling up the city of Durango. You have to give a minimum of 30 days notice of your event, and we're saying this event is on October 22nd. And then we had to have like the whole safety plan of what you're doing with those 200 people, and they had to have everything mapped out. And so I know that we haven't traditionally done that, but I'm kind of feeling like maybe this is something that we need to be working towards just for safety and liability. And anyone who's saying they're not going to alert the local businesses that the roads are going to be closed, and that's on them, like
that's unacceptable.
I'm kind of like, well, maybe we're not going to sign off on your event if you can't take the time to let local businesses know that we're closing the road for your special event.
Yeah,
Like,
and
that seems ridiculous.
Just to clarify, she did say then that it got done, but it
Just didn't.
I get to
But it was
talk to a
last-
lot of high school kids because I've got one, and you know a lot of them work for Parks and Rec and are on the homecoming committee, and they're like, we didn't do that, so I don't know if it
I
actually
think it
got
could be
done
just
or
a
not.
quick phone call to one of the
A little door hanger.
Yeah.
A little note on the door.
Well, I'm hearing that you're supporting us, making some changes, and I still do not have any issue with the town coming up with the resources and staff to do this thing. But it's really your decision, and 30 days seems to make sense for any special event that they're
Well,
planning.
that's another thing to note on this application is that it does say it on our application fee that you need to turn it in at least 30 days prior, and they were late.
And if they have alcohol, 45 days.
Yeah.
And
No,
they
I'm
were way late.
Last week.
So one more thing that's like, hey, you got to be on time if you actually want your event to happen.
So typically what I've done versus waiting until October is I've gathered all these addresses and names and went back to them, said, and by the way, 2023 is going to be a new day, and these are things you need to be prepared for, and we're not going to have a variance for turning it in on Thursday so you can get it on the Tuesday agenda. And so you do need to make sure that you're getting out some, public relations and making sure they know that it's coming.
Yeah, definitely.
They will forget, but then, the day that they're in here saying, well, I didn't, I saw that letter, but, my husband threw it away or whatever, then it's up to you as a board to make that decision.
And this event, or they're just doing alcohol, are they doing any food and beverage?
Yeah, they still.
Yeah,
They
they
would
have
have
to.
to, yeah.
They're doing hot dogs and stuff like that. It's
Okay,
on there.
so, I mean, they also need to have a special event license issued by San Juan Basin Public Health according.
It's covered under bottom
ESP.
shelves.
Okay,
Food
so
license.
it's, okay, well, I didn't know
Yeah.
it was through them, that's what I
Yeah.
was asking, where was
It's
this
hosted
last
at Bottom
year?
Shelf. It's an event they
Okay.
do every year.
Okay.
It's just,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think we're too late to probably impose.
I mean,
too many of
I
these
wouldn't,
demands,
I
but-
wouldn't oppose this today.
No.
In all honesty, I mean, it is what it is.
Set
It's,
better
it's our
standards.
bad that we aren't prepared better, so.
Yeah, we need to set better standards and
It just,
follow
yeah.
through with them.
I would just say let's revise our event requests and,
We are aware that a lot of facility agreements need to be
Yeah.
revised, and, this winter, we're going to be typing away.
yeah.
Sounds good.
You need a,
Yeah, we need a motion for.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the B. Frank Special Event Liquor License, use of Mill Street, October 22nd.
I second that motion.
All right. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Aw.
Yay.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Harts.
Yes.
Trustee Luke.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, moving on to our direction and discussion regarding our deed restriction.
Can't hurt.
Yeah.
Just a feeling.
Need to bring that back.
And, I mean, is this super time sensitive or? That's,
I mean, I think that, it's, what, our timeline
If we
is
get
what?
the grant, we'll probably start infrastructure in the spring would be ideal, and that's next year. We probably won't see structures until 2024, so I do think we have some time, but we want to, again, have these conversations so you guys are starting to get prepared for that process.
And my guess is that the interview that we're having regarding our letter of interest may ask some of these
Okay.
questions as well.
Probably especially regarding the pricing.
I think the pricing is going to depend on grants and, cost of, the cost to build it. Yeah.
And
So, but
interest
if,
rates.
if we're pricing at, kind of like you were suggesting, if we're pricing at a level for 80% of area median income, we could actually figure out a number
that?
that is of course dependent on many variables, including,
Right.
One of the biggest ones being interest rates. But we could actually get a number if you guys say, okay, we want to price these at affordability for a household of 3 at 80% AMI. Like we could get a number to aim for, and that would probably be helpful for the folks who are bidding.
So I like that idea, just the 80% with a family of 3. I
Okay.
think that's a great place to start from. Everybody else? Yay, nay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Like it.
There you go.
I think the other big question was the workforce requirements. Is that going to be, you think,
So I
a
think,
topic of?
workforce
grant?
requirements, they should have to live here a year in the 5 counties. Region 9.
Region 9.
Region 9, okay.
Okay, so just a residency requirement, not
A work.
not a workforce.
Yeah, I
requirement.
think we get into a lot of
That's so much
problems when
easier.
you
I
do.
super appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think it'd get a lot harder for us if
Okay.
we do that, and I don't want to
See, I kind of disagree. I want the people who live in these homes to be, we're trying to provide workforce housing. And so if I'm a new teacher moving to Bayfield to take a job, I'm not going to meet the residency requirement. But the other requirement said that you have a 32-hour per week job at the time of application. And so that could be you're working in the area and kind of meet that, but, I mean.
Either or too.
Yeah. there
I mean,
was an
like
either or.
these aren't mutually exclusive. Like, and as far, I can go either way, as far as administering the program and as far as writing up guidelines.
Either or, then.
My question would be, because you mentioned it on here, how do we prevent ourselves from being discriminatory towards those that are disabled?
So typically the residency requirement
Would work.
would work. I think that.
I meant if we
that there
did the
need-
32 to 40-hour work.
Yeah,
thing.
but a residency requirement, regardless of their working status, can work, because people who are coming from the outside are not a protected class. People who are disabled are. And I think that there might need to be we'll need to have some sort of process for exceptions, for fair housing exceptions. Like we need to do our best, to make sure that the rules don't go against any sort of fair housing regulations. But if there's some sort of a situation where someone says, hey, this rule excludes me because of,
So basically, a minimum of 1 year of living here, or be employed at a 32+ hour job in the area.
and that's our requirement for our mortgage assistance program.
And that avoids that whole, so yeah, I'm
Knock
okay
on
with that
wood.
too.
Well, when I thought
But if
when
you
we-
just leave the 32+ hour job, then you run into that risk of being discriminatory against the.
Well, and that's something we can work out. There's rules and regulations on that. I'm looking at this as when we agreed to do this 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I can't remember. Why were we doing this? It was to have housing for people who work we were very Bayfield specific, but we've opened it up, but we were trying to make it so there was a housing that people in the workforce could afford to buy. And if you're a teacher coming in at $37,000 a year and the only house available is in my neighborhood for $500,000, that's not affordable for us to have that teacher. So if we're saying you just have to live here a year, but the work is different, like how is that
So it's
meeting our
live here
needs?
a year or work the
Yeah,
32-hour job.
Yes, and there was other bullets, I just don't have it up, where I'm looking at it as, the whole point was so that people who could work here could live here. So if it's just.
You want to shorten it to just in Bayfield town proper?
No, not Bayfield. I'm saying you need to also have employment. I'm fine if it's Region 9 or in the Southwest Colorado or something like that, but I think there needs to be some form of, there's some sort, if you meet all the qualifications that aren't discriminatory, that you have some form of work that is supporting our community.
That's the
but
currently employed in the county for
Yes, but
32
the
hours.
other or is you've just lived here a year. It doesn't mean you're working here.
If you don't work due to some circumstance that you cannot work.
Yes,
That's-
that. So it's not you have just lived here a year,
But
Except
then you're getting into-
then we have to determine who can
Right.
work, who can't work. Like there's some potentially sticky territory there. So I mean, I prefer to leave it with those kind of both options. I mean, you guys can certainly push against me, but as far as administering it and avoiding a lawsuit, which
It could
none of
be a
us
nightmare.
want.
Yeah,
I
it
mean, we
is
do
just to
need
avoid a
be-
lawsuit. It's
we
not,
need to be a little careful.
I'm getting the intent, and probably most likely the intent is going to be, it is for people that work here, not necessarily that, but I think that what the goal is to avoid a lawsuit. And that's the reason that it'd be 1 year versus just having a job. Because then you're running into You know, I'm thinking of some people that actually serve on committees that we could run into discriminatory issues with.
Okay, so the,
I think 32 hours a week, or having lived here for a year, that's, you know, I do think that is enough to keep us out of trouble. And also, we want to have a roof over the heads of the people who are disabled in our community. Right. We want to have a roof over the head of people who are retired in our community, you know? And I understand that we want to aim this toward people who are part of our workforce, and I think that it'll largely be aimed toward people who are part of our workforce, but keeping the door a little bit open to those other people who are also part of our community.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm just
good.
thinking about people who are going to move here from another state just because we have affordable housing and they work remotely. I'm not thinking of it as
and that's-
retired
it's a hard-
individuals in our community, or I'm not, that's not something that I'm discounting at all. I'm just making sure that this is serving our community, because that's why we're doing that. And I don't want this to be desirable for others to come in to our community and try to take it over, because that's not, our point is we have people here now who can't afford to live here and work here.
And I think that the residency requirement largely covers that. I mean, it would take quite a bit of strategizing for someone to move here.
and qualify.
Like, I don't think that someone's going to move here specifically for this housing. Like, they're going to be otherwise part of our community.
Maybe something to think about on this. So live in the Region 9 area for 1 year, but if you're in the workforce, what if you're in the workforce in a small area, whether it's LaPlata County or Bayfield? Bayfield might be too restrictive there, but that kind of covers what Lori's concerned are. So you either lived in Region 9 area for 1 year, or you're in the workforce.
When you apply.
Right.
So you could have lived here a month.
Yeah,
And apply.
I mean, and that's
still
exactly how our mortgage
You can,
assistance.
so you can narrow the workforce to La Plata County.
Yeah, and it's.
If you want to.
It's specific, like when, in her example, is currently employed in the 5-county region in a 32-hour work/week job. So it doesn't necessarily cover those remote, they'd have to have an employer that is here in our area. And we can make that 5 counties, or we can make it La Plata, we could make it Bayfield. That piece, that would be easy. And we would still cover that potential lawsuits by the 1 year and having it an or.
Yeah, I mean, we could make this as broad or as tight of requirements as you guys want, as long as we're not going against fair housing laws. Right. Yeah. So I do recommend not going with just town of Bayfield requirements. It's just not a large enough community to have a big enough market. I would say kind of a minimum of La Plata County for any sort of workforce or residency requirements, but we could make it just La Plata County. It's fine.
Only because we're all going to be pooling our funds to an RHA that is
It's
also
true.
going to be
That is very
assisting.
true.
It's just the county, and
Yeah, it's not all of Region 9.
yeah.
I would agree with that.
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of that. Was that a pro or a con of going with just the county? Like, do you want to,
No,
to aim more
I
for,
want it
for,
to just
for
be the
entire
county,
region,
to be honest.
or just the county?
I'm fine with that.
Up to you guys.
I think there are enough people in this county that could fill these houses.
Yes.
So I kind of like, solving our problems locally here in the county. I don't know. It's open for discussion, but that's just kind of how I feel.
I'd like to narrow it down.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
La Plata County?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
Even though we were talking earlier about the pricing at 80% of area median income, do we want to limit the incomes of the people who buy it higher than that? Like it.
I like that range.
I like the 120. I was just,
Okay.
that number was sticking out to me, so.
120% of area median income? Okay. that works.
And Nicole, you said the grants
140?
would cover that, right?
Confirmed it goes to 140.
Okay.
And so, so there's a,
Yeah, I mean, if, yeah, I would say pending any
Pending
kind
what
of
we did,
grant,
yeah, the-
right.
Yeah.
right.
requirements.
Right, any sort of grant requirements, of course. You know, this conversation can be adjusted and, you know, but I do want to have some guidelines so that I can write up guidelines and write up the deed restrictions so that when the time comes when we start marketing these units, people can know what they're getting themselves into.
About the issue of percentage of resale.
That's what I was just looking at. That's
Next issue.
Great, thank you. So, yeah, the appreciation percentage.
I mean, you know, I want everybody to have the American dream to be able to build some equity in these. I just don't know what the standard go-to, you know, number on that is.
It used to be 3% for deed restricted housing, just kind of
And
across,
so it's
across,
in between
across
that
the board.
1.5 to 3, that's,
Yeah, but, yeah, 3 used to be pretty standard. More recently, I've heard of programs that are more limited to 1.5.
When you think about 3% on a $300,000 home, that's $9,000 in 1 year. You know, if you're deed restricting and like you're making them stay in the home or the property for 5 years, I mean, you're looking at, you know, $45,000, they would have a down payment for moving up into a next property as well as paying, you know, real estate fees. So I don't think 3% is unreasonable.
Why are they being reduced?
Largely because
Is to keep
the subsidy
as
that's being
workforce
put,
housing
that's
for the
put
next
into
person.
it, and then also, yeah, to keep it affordable for the next person. So, like Trustee Moreland was saying, you know, in 5 years, that's $45,000.
Right.
It that decreases the affordability of the unit. So.
Because what happened with Fox Farms is they're at market price today, and
right.
so they're priced out of
Right.
being affordable housing anymore. It takes it completely out of that. and
Right,
just
I
makes it
understand
more.
that.
But if
I'm
you-
just wondering, so I understand the subsidy, but you said that they used to be 3% and now you're seeing this decrease.
Yeah. And I'm
It's
not
out of
sure,
control.
to be completely honest with you, like why that is. I think it's because more subsidy is required and people don't, and the organizations and municipalities that are putting in a lot of money into these homes don't want to lose any of their ground, of the affordability ground. I think that's a big part of it, but I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
I mean, I just feel
with
like that's one of the things that I need to put more thought into.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think 1.5 is like way too low. Then it's like you're almost like you're renting it and you're not making any money and you can't move on and go buy the next place. But I do think 3 is very high because then the next person comes along and it's out of control again. So, I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one for me. I would like to.
So I think that generally for deed restricted housing, the appreciation benefit of home ownership it's so greatly decreased that that's not necessarily one of the benefits of home ownership anymore. You still get the benefits of your price stability. You still get the benefits of being able to paint the walls whatever you want. You still get the benefit of your landlord's never going to kick you out and your landlord's never going to raise your rents, and you could still have your dogs. You know, like you still get some really good benefits of home ownership, but the wealth building aspect is largely taken away. And it just kind of is what it is. Like every program has its pros and cons, and we need to have some sort of deed restriction in order to protect the public subsidy. I get that, but that's largely just not as much on the table. But at 3%, it's still I mean, there's still some appreciation.
And over the time frame that they own their home, they're paying down the principal on it. So there's also still that equity they will have by paying down whatever loan that they have on the property. Or if they stay there for 30 years, they could own it outright and sell it and, retire or have a place to live where they don't pay any kind of house payment other than their property taxes annually and any insurance, as they retire. So there is some benefits for it. It's not as great of benefits as like somebody who doesn't go through a property such as this. However, would they get into anything else?
Right.
Would they ever even have that opportunity? And once you're in homeownership and you've paid it down and you've got a little bit of equity, your ability to buy again in the future is much easier to do if you wanted to sell that property and move up and graduate to something else. And the average homeowner probably lives in their home about 7 years before they sell and get a bigger house, or, their family grows, or they move to a different area, they get a different job. So the odds of them staying in that property it is
So what's
minimal.
the number that you're comfortable with? What's the?
I think the 3% is reasonable, to be honest with you. They could probably pay it down 20 grand in that time frame, their mortgage, plus then they have 45,000, if it was 3% over 5 years. In 5 years time frame, they could afford 10%
But then
down
the
on
next
something
person
else.
coming into that property, because that's my concern.
The next person coming into that property, you're still going to be lower than your average market because they're increasing like 20%. Unless we have a big dip that happens, but then they're going to dip too.
Well, we're not gonna have a 20% year-over-year increase in housing prices. Is that what you were referring to?
It's been that way for a while.
Right.
Yeah, but we can have a dip and that can happen, but then it goes back up. It's a revolving thing. Housing prices aren't ever gonna be like, you talk to your grandparents and they're like, yeah, I bought my house for $45,000. And then we're not gonna get back there, unfortunately. But it still makes it less than your average house would be, I think. I guess that's my thought.
Yeah, we want people to access all of those benefits. And just the appreciation cap does limit the benefits, but like Trustee Moreland was saying, there are lots of other benefits, and it's not like there's zero equity. Like, people will be paying down their mortgage. Exactly. And even though appreciation is capped at either 1.5%, 3%, any number in between, there's still some appreciation.
So could we get a thumbs up for 3%? There's one.
Yeah,
Okay.
fine with me.
So we're kind of in a majority of 3%, just as a place to start. When that deed restriction comes and you've done your homework and decide it's going to be something different, maybe that's the piece that you edit at the time it comes back to you.
Okay. I think when we mentioned, do we use a realtor or not, everyone said yes.
Yes.
That would be like
realtor.
an RFP. We'd put that out to.
And I guess that was what I was going to ask.
Yes.
Would the town spearhead that and putting out an RFP?
I think we would. I think the experience that we have here with town staff, we're not going to do it ourselves, but if we found basically that realtor that would work with us, we're going to have to reduce those commissions because that will kill the eventually. The other thing is that they're on a lottery. The homes are open on a lottery, and there's no realtor involved, but there still has to be a contract involved. So there still has to be something that a
inspections.
mortgage company is working with, again, we don't want to be realtors either.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are some things that we're going to have to work out.
And the selection of the home buyers by a lottery process is something that Homespend could certainly handle. you know, a lot of the work that a realtor would typically do of marketing the unit, finding the buyers, negotiating a price, like that doesn't need
It's
to
gone, yeah.
it doesn't need to be done, right?
We're
So-
only using them for their real estate license and the insurance and the knowledge they have to protect both parties.
Yep. Yep.
So if somebody goes into foreclosure, would you like the first right of refusal, the town buys it back?
Yes.
Versus, I mean,
Yes.
that's
That
not
scared me
in
to
here,
know.
and
100%.
Lisa, I don't think.
I know,
Yeah,
went through
sorry.
that. But from my understanding, that would save you from having a mortgage company that ends up back on
Yeah,
the
then-
free market.
So,
Right.
so right of first refusal,
Doesn't mean you have to buy
I
it.
think we could do that, but if it's going to actually be used, there's gonna need to be some money behind it. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think that,
Yeah.
You put a down payment on, and then you turn around and sell it back to
Yeah.
somebody who's qualified to do restrictions, so it's not like you have to hold on to it. If we have a wait list or something.
Yeah, I'm,
I think talking to an accountant about how you need to account for that, or your auditing firms, I'm not 100% sure how that should be accounted for, but certainly I think that having a right of first refusal, like Katie just said, you don't have to exercise
Yeah,
it.
you don't have to buy it
You don't
back.
have to buy it.
But it gives us the
but it-
option that
Yeah.
we can at that time if
Mhm.
we want to.
Well, we definitely need to work with our auditor, so that'd be a
Yeah.
good question.
Yep.
I'd put it on there and then we'll figure that out.
I'm happy to write down all of our lending requirements, and I think that they're all pretty reasonable for making sure that people get into a sustainable situation. See, we did mention there was some talk about roommates. Do you guys want to have any? Just like let people do whatever they want.
I'm
with
just
their
concerned
house,
about
or-
the HOA. I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
I would think the HOA would.
Yeah, is this gonna have its own HOA, or will it?
no, it falls within Cinnamon Heights.
It's currently there.
Then I guess we need a copy of those.
It's gonna fall
Yeah.
where?
Yeah,
So there's no
I do
current
have a copy.
HOA
I have a
on
copy,
for those
and I go to
properties
those
already?
annual
Oh, there is?
meetings.
We don't get to have ours
So-
when we have to,
Okay.
we have to play nicey.
But
Do they
I-
have anything in
in that
their
area.
Yeah, 'cause
covenants
there's
right
houses
now
all
that
over.
would
I'm sorry, I
restrict
don't
having?
remember that specifically.
No, they're- I mean, they
I
can
think
have-
there can't be any short-term rentals. I think the person, it shouldn't be a rental for somebody else.
Yeah, like,
Renting a
they buy it
bedroom
and
is
then rent it
not,
out.
I don't want to be Big Brother and looking in
yeah, I
to
don't
see
wanna
if they're
do that
renting a
either.
bedroom. But
Yeah.
if they're renting the whole unit out, that's a completely
That's
different
different,
story.
yeah.
And
It
I
has to be their primary residence,
Yeah.
and I agree with the
Yeah.
80%.
having
on
roommates
that,
doesn't
but-
bother me so much. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's more all of a sudden you get 15 cars parked in there, and
Yeah,
that's
like you've got multiple families living there, and I just don't know how.
I'm sure there. Well, I'm not sure because I haven't
Yeah.
actually read the Cinnamon Heights HOA documents, but I mean,
They probably
like
have
most
something
HOA
preventing that.
documents will have something along those lines of, you know,
Prevent you from having the whole world live with you.
right.
Just, I'm trying to be mindful of those who are already there and had some concerns about what we were doing. That's why I'm kind of going worst case scenario with what could happen, because I don't know how this works. I'm learning from you and the presentations you've provided us, but I definitely don't want to. I would like for this to be as successful as possible, as I know everyone in this
And do it
room,
right.
including
We
you,
wanna-
want. And so I'm just, again, thinking of things where I'm like, that would drive me insane if,
Right.
but I don't know how that, well, you can do whatever you want, it's just deed restricted, so you could,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like the deed restriction puts extra restrictions on what people can do. So, you know, can people try their hardest to find loopholes? You know, could they try their hardest to find loopholes through anything? Like, yeah,
That
people
can happen.
people can, but the deed restriction actually puts in more restrictions than you know someone who just owned their house outright. So, you know, we're going to. We aim to make this a community that helps the people who are in our community to gain all the benefits of affordable home ownership, you know, but is it possible that someone will try and skirt the rules?
Yeah, take advantage of the system.
Take advantage of the system, yeah, but we'll do our best to write the documents in a way that prevents that. And learn lessons from past programs and, you know, do our best to plug any sort of holes.
So one of the things I noticed we didn't put on there was how, a time requirement, how long they need to live there for,
So.
as their primary residence.
Right. So for our mortgage assistance program, we don't have any sort of limits. You know, someone could buy it and then 4 months later sell it. I mean, it tends to not work out in their best interest for as far as, you know, fees and realtor fees and transfer fees and cost of moving and things like that. I honestly haven't seen any deed restrictions that require that people live in a home for a certain period of time.
In California, I've seen it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's big time on their deed restrictions.
Yeah, what if you get transferred or you get
Yeah.
like married
Yeah.
and you know, I wouldn't want to see a restriction on that. That's
So
perk of
Fox
home
Farm
ownership.
has
I mean,
one
even
that the town
Jaffa has
paid for the
They're used to it.
water and sewer PIFs. And if they didn't live there for 10 years, they had to return that money to the town at the next closing. But we've only had one since I've been here. And so right now, I think most of those residents have lived there for 10 years, so. But I would hate to be determining another, you know,
Yeah,
how many
I feel like
years.
that's a different scenario there.
If we had a housing authority and they were managing these housing, that would be one thing, but it shouldn't be town staff.
It's $1,030,000.
So are there any other things that you guys would like to discuss on this? I mean, I think that the next steps are for me to create kind of a matrix of the requirements for the program, create some procedures, documents, and write up drafts of the deed restriction, and then start going back and forth.
It's pretty eye-opening.
Okay, well, yeah, that's what this meeting was for. You know, I think we in some ways jumped the gun a little bit for having an agreement for Homes Fund to be providing this. We were paid in 2022 to provide this information, and sorry that we reached end of third quarter before actually getting you guys this information. So I apologize for that, but we still do have plenty of time until the buildings are actually occupied, and happy to be a partner with the town in this. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying late, too.
Sorry, everybody. That was. Get you. All right, you have your meeting scheduled. Get your breakfast in to Katie if you haven't. And I'm gonna go ahead and just adjourn this meeting. It's 9:04.
Oh, and please take pizza home.
Oh, I'm going to. I'm starving. I haven't eaten yet.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll just wait till after the meeting to eat.
That's why I didn't wait. I was like, it's gonna be too late.
I know with everything that was on there, no.